And then Councilmember Tidswell, are you on for our invocation? So I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we ask your blessings for the people of our community.
Lord, we ask your blessings for the people in our community and the places in which we live, work, and play. Help us not ask first, how do we fix this, but what do we need to learn? How might we need to change? And to whom do we need to listen? Grant us the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. May we speak out when it is time to speak out and listen patiently and receptively when it's time to listen. May we always be guided by the spirit of community, by the spirit of justice, and by the spirit of love. This we pray in the name of all that we hold sacred. Amen.
Amen. Tony, would you please call the roll?
Thank you.
Councilmember Shaw. Here. Buick. Neese.
Here.
Owen.
Here.
Joy. Present. Chariki.
Thank you, I'm here.
Tidswell. Here. Purinton. Boyette. Here. Rupsis. Here. Mayor Cole.
Here. Thank you. Our October 24th minutes are pending, so we'll deal with those in our next business meeting. And the citizen recognition awards also will be done at our next meeting. We do have a proclamation this evening, though, in recognition of the Salvation Army Red Kettle campaign kickoff, and reads as follows. Whereas for over 125 years, the Salvation Army has been an important organization in the Billings community, and whereas the ringing of the Salvation Army bell is sounded out through our community as the sound of hope to those in need and a call to our community to give to the Red Kettle campaign. And whereas the lives of many area residents are enriched by the spiritual and physical contributions of the Salvation Army, and whereas each year the Salvation Army conducts a Red Kettle campaign on behalf of the less fortunate. This year's Red Kettle campaign will raise funds to continue to provide meals through the mobile meal feeding program, provide emergency rental and housing assistance, provide seasonal assistance to families in need this Christmas and throughout the year, and will continue to provide hope to the most vulnerable in our community. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim Friday, November 18, 2022 as Salvation Army Red Kettle Campaign Kickoff Day, and call upon the residents of Billings to support this special service through contributions and volunteering so that the real meaning of the season is not forgotten. Let the sound of hope be heard throughout Billings, Montana. It is that time of year, so please support the Red Kettles when you see them. And special thanks to Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Roy Neese, who filled in for me on Saturday under, I'd say short notice, but it was more like no notice, at a Salvation Army event to kick off Red Kettle campaign. So special thank you to Councilmember Neese. Thank you very much. That's it for our proclamations. Council reports. Are there any from organizations or committees that council members serve on behalf of the city? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. So the council committee for that's working on the legislative issues had our first meeting last week. So just to give you a quick update, we elected Councilmember Neese as our chairperson and set our agenda for the next meeting, where we're going to review the 6 draft bills that are currently being proposed by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. We're going to review the Montana League of Cities and Towns legislative priorities, and then kind of pick areas of interest to follow. So we'll be reporting back to you with more information.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other council reports? Councilmember Purinton.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This past week, we had a meeting with our local legislators. The sheriff was there, police chief was there. Some other guests also were there. We discussed possible legislation during this next session, and also they reviewed very quickly the drafts that Kendra referred to, and those are on the Criminal Justice Oversight Council's website, which is through Montana, what is it, leg.gov, but it's on their website. And so anyway, and then we'll also pick up some of the other drafts that they're going to be putting together. They have a meeting this week. So hopefully there'll be some more things that deal specifically with public safety. And I think there's a lot of good things that will come out of that legislative session. So, and I was appreciative to the mayor and for Chris for being there and presenting the city's point of view. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Purrington, for organizing that, too. Any other council reports? Seeing none, city administrator report. Chris.
So this afternoon or this morning, you received some information for the action items, actually regular agenda item 2, and I'm going to let Assistant City Administrator Iflin, he'll cover that when he presents that item in the budget. So other than that, I don't have anything to report.
Okay, we'll move on then to public comment on non-public hearing agenda items. Tonight, that's item 1, the consent agenda, anything on the consent agenda in those subparts, or item 3, which is city administrator's contract and evaluation. We will have a public hearing on item number 2. That's the RFP for the potential sale of the city properties in item number 2. We'll get to that later, but if you have anything to offer and would like to be heard on the consent agenda, item 1 or 3, please come forward at this time. Ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Is there any public comment on items 1 or item 3? Carrie.
Mayor and council, just wanted to make myself available if you have questions about.
Is. There you go. Now I know where the button is. Just wanted to make myself available if you have any questions about consent agenda item 1A and how we ended up arriving at the additional sum there for the United Way administration of the contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comment on items 1 or 3 before we close the public comment period? There's no one online. Kevin will trust you to wave frantically if at any point tonight there's somebody online. Okay, thank you. Then we'll close the public comment period on items 1 and 3. Move on to our consent agenda, item number 1. Are there any separations from the consent agenda? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I move to separate item 1A.
Item 1A, agreement with United Way and the continuum of care for low barrier shelter. Any other separations? Councilmember Purrington.
Yes, I'd like to separate 1C and 1E.
Item 1C, consultant agreement with land design, develop master plan for Cottonwood Park, and 1E, professional services contract with Dowell for two-way street conversion.
Thank you.
Any other separations? Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, I'd like to separate item 1D.
1D, construction agreement, foreclosure, acquisition, rehab project. Any other separations? Councilmember Neese.
Item K and M, please.
Item K, tax increment finance assistance, eBird, and K and N, was that?
M is in Mary.
M, resolution relating to South TIF district bonds. Any other separations? Okay, we'll proceed to the, oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Gulick.
No, just you're proceeding.
Okay, yeah, we will move on to the those that were not separated, if there's more than one. Go ahead, Councilmember Gulick.
I move to approve the items on the consent agenda as is submitted, with the exception of items A, C, D, E, K, and M.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Boyette. Discussion. Is there any discussion on the non-separated items? Councilmember Neese.
On item B, that was not separated, correct?
That is correct. It was not separated.
All right. Just a quick question. Chris, I don't know who, if anyone's here to represent this, but can you, it wasn't too long ago that we took in-house, the city purchased the marketing and advertising firm for the Met, and now we're adding some additional costs. Can you explain how this enhances or how that fits with what we did as far as purchasing that other marketing advertising firm.
Confident that Rusty can do a much better job than I. So Rusty's
Thank you.
to my right, and I'll ask him to answer that question. Thank you, sir.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So what this consulting agreement really is in support of the programs both at transit and at the airport. It's really because, we're not graphic designers or anything such as that. We can't actually produce, most of the items that need to go on the advertising. So what this is getting into place firms that we can then pass those customers to have their advertising developed, produced, and then get ready for actual display in the amenities that we have. So as far as our own use and enhancement of it, it also puts somebody under contract that we can use for our own marketing purposes, whether that be at the airport or at Met Transit. But really, the bulk of this is really just going to have firms that were competitively selected and available for those individuals who wish to advertise on our amenities to utilize. Does that?
I think if I understand correctly, so this other firm, before we purchased them, would use someone like this for their graphic design, and then, of course, the customer who is advertising with them would really pay them for that cost for the
Yes.
graphic design.
Yep.
So we're not adding any additional cost to the city in the sense that if we were to go out and prior to us ever purchasing, becoming our advertising firm, we would actually be paying those costs with other departments anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the costs for that are, it's essentially a pass-through from
Okay.
those entities that are purchasing the advertising space. The only time we'd actually be paying for it is if they're development for our own in-house type of marketing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, yep.
Rusty, Councilmember Purinton?
Okay, I'm just trying to remember, because I didn't have a problem with this, but you made a comment about customers that want to put advertisements like on the side of the bus. I thought there was something, was it sometime last year, wasn't that long ago, that there were some things that you, not you personally, but Matt was looking at, they could do it in-house, cheaper than going out and hiring someone to do it. But now it looks like that's what this is.
This is actually, so this is primarily focused on the creative portion as opposed to actually management of the actual amenities themselves. Previously in the concession, the individual who we had ended up purchasing those benches from was doing all the
Right.
maintenance and upkeep and all of those types of things on the benches
Okay.
themselves. And then there was a cost share agreement that was in there. So we brought all those maintenance services in-house using our own staff to do that.
Okay.
However, we don't do graphic design
Gotcha.
and those types of things. So that's why we brought
Gotcha.
this up.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just point out for the public, item 1I on our consent agenda, which is a donation to the Billings Police Department for the K-9 program and also fiber optic upgrades at the evidence facility. That donation is about a little more than $22,000 in value, and it's coming to the city from Phillips 66. So those are dollars that our taxpayers don't have to pay, and we appreciate that from Phillips 66. So Phillips 66, thank you. Any other discussion or questions about the non-separated items? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question about the item number G, the contract for the restaurant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, just a quick question. I mean, I understand why this wasn't bid initially because we didn't really know what was going on. So now we're building the restaurant structure at $1 million plus contract, plus for 100, what is $1 million, probably $1 million, one or 280, something like that total.
Just over $1.1 million.
And when we look at something like this and we go to now to lease this out, did we already have a lease contract on this for this price amount so that, or are we now, we've already got the set amount of what we're going to get for revenue from the restaurant and now we're building it, and in that case, then really what is our return on investment when it comes to spending $1 million, almost $1.3 million to get
Yes.
this built?
Okay, so there's two parts to this. One is when we did the RFP for the restaurant concessionaire, he put in his proposal what he would put forward into the new facility. That included all the finishes, to make it look like the fine restaurant that it's going to be. Includes seating, tables, all of that stuff. What we're paying for is the set infrastructure to have a restaurant in that upper concourse level. So basically, in the first contract with Sletton, we just basically said, build the 4 walls, do nothing else until we know what we're gonna do. Then they came back and said, okay, here's what the concept is, and here's what it's gonna look like, and here's what it's gonna take to get to that point by moving, plumbing, gas lines, HVAC systems, hoods, all of those things that would stay when the vendor leaves. So this is probably a setup for at least 20 years. Did we do a cost analysis? No, because it's more of a customer convenience thing. But we will make revenue on this program no matter what. And with the revenues that we're seeing with the new facilities, temporary facilities we got up there, we can only imagine what it's going to be like when we actually see the facility completed and in operation. We're very excited to see this thing come to fruition.
Okay, thank you. I kind of thought that I was a little concerned that we got the cart before the horse on that contract, because I didn't realize that we were going to have another $1.3 million that we'd have to recoup from that. And I'm hoping that you at least had some type of cost estimate of what it was going to be as far as getting that investment return, as far as what they were going to pay us back for it.
Yeah, so if part of the thing that makes this so good for the city is that 88% of it's covered with federal funds. So, I mean, the small piece that we're going to be paying for will easily make up very quickly from the revenues from the concession.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or questions relating to the non-separated items before we proceed to a vote? Seeing none, the motion is for approval of item 1, non-separated items. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. First separated item up then is item 1A, agreement with United Way for low barrier shelter. Councilmember Shaw, that was your separation. How would you like us to proceed?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve this agreement, but I believed it had to be pulled off the consent agenda to increase the funding by the $28,000 that's being requested to cover their financial administration. So my motion would be, I move to approve the agreement with United Way COC for the low barrier shelter for the total amount not to exceed $231,000 or less if they close early or expenditures are not needed.
Okay, before I seek let's get a second. Thank you very much. And here I'm going to ask, Councilmember Rupsis made the second. We'll proceed, but I'm just going to ask Chris Kukulski to clarify, and Carrie is here to ask questions of as well. But Chris, you and I had a discussion early this morning about that 231 number, specifically the budget number in the packet, which does include compensation for United Way, was 221 and change. So do we now know whether it's 221 based on the budget shown in our packet or this 231 that was in the staff report?
Mayor and Council, how I would explain it is this, as we talked this morning, and as you can see from their addendum to the contract, really to the dollar with all the various line items, the math on it, trying to scroll down to it, is 221 and change. Similar to the not to exceed 210 or not to exceed 231, there's $8,000 to $9,000 in there of potential unanticipated legitimate cost. Whether you approve it at 220, not to exceed the dollar figure in the addendum, you could do that way. Or if you stick with the 231, we're going to use this addendum. These are what we're going to look at as receipts. And I would say it would, at the 231 level, provide some unanticipated costs that we'd have to make a judgment call staff-wise. Is that a legitimate cost tied to the shelter?
Okay, Chris, if I can just do my executive summary of what you just said, just confirm if it's correct. the current budget, and the only numbers that we currently have in front of us are 221, 250. And we would reimburse based on that. But if this motion passes at 231, it would give $10,000 of, call it cushion, that could be used if there was a need for further justifications in the, or then it was further justified in the future. Is that right? That it's not needed right now, as far as we know, but it's, would be available?
Everything in front of you is an estimate, and yes, you're either going to approve it right to the dollar at the 221, 250, or if it's at the 231, it does provide some unanticipated costs that the staff could determine, is it consistent with the contract? Is it consistent with the expenses? And make the reimbursement.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Councilmember Shaw. I just want the council to know what we're talking about here. Exhibit C in your packet is the budget, and the last number there in the lower right-hand corner is 221,250, not 231. So I guess I would suggest that if 231 remains the motion, that there be some clarification for what would happen with that extra 10, how that would get dispensed or not get dispensed. But right now there is an inconsistency between those two numbers. So we do have a motion before us. Further discussion. Councilmember Neese.
Does this mean that we're going to, if this motion passes, we would have to adjust the budget by another 10,000? Do I understand that correctly? Because it wasn't in the budget?
And by the budget, you're referring to the Continuum of Cares budget in Exhibit C?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were referring to
It's not a city
budget.
item, no. It's the Continuum of Care budget, which is Exhibit C.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Shaw.
I mean, I can go either way on this. I was going off of the staff memo, which is where I got 231, but I think I'll leave it for now and see, because I would prefer that they have that cushion versus having to come back to us and go through this again on an emergency basis, as long as it's with the stipulation that it has to, exactly what Chris said, it has to meet, the terms of the contract. It would need to be approved by staff. And then if it's not needed, it's not needed.
Okay. Further discussion. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go back to the beginning. If this money had been given to, say, the rescue mission, we wouldn't be dealing with this, right? We wouldn't be spending $21,000 more in taxpayer money. Would they need this additional money?
Councilmember Boyette, Mayor and Council, I would assume not, because they wouldn't need a third-party administrator to oversee it. In this case, United Way need to play that role. They were successful at negotiating their normal fee from 15% to 10%, but it is a fee that was necessary to do the structure.
Thank you.
And you're referring to the extra 20,000, okay, because the rescue mission did have an application for more than $500,000, so it's not like they were offering to provide it for free.
No, it's just this administration fee that we wouldn't be paying if we had a different agency running the program.
Okay. Further discussion. Councilmember Purinton.
One of my question is that, so there was the discussion about the difference in the money. There was also the discussion on, I think you brought it up, Mr. Mayor, on how the wording should be in the contract. So I'm just wondering, do we have a complete contract that we can truly sign, that we're not doing the same thing, flying by the seat of our pants and going, oh, let's change this and change this, and what do we know? What are we voting on?
So, Councilmember Purinton, Mayor and Council, there were two, in consultation with the mayor, he had two suggestions of ways to tighten, I'll use that term, the agreement. In discussion with our city attorney and the mayor, both agreed it didn't change the intent of what was in the agreement, but it maybe cleared it up or made it more clear. There's no loose ends here as far as we're not flying by the seat of our pants. The addendums are to the dollar in Exhibit C of the budget. In fact, for clarification, city attorney reminded me, the 210 had about $9,000 in cushion in it. The actual budget at that time was 201. I simply took the $21,000 fee for United Way and added it to the 210 as an additional cost. That's how I got to the 231. There already was some space in there between their actual budget and the not to exceed 210, and we added the administrative fee to it, to the 231 number. Whether you want to amend Councilmember Shaw's motion to clarify what I recall this morning, there were 2 sentences in 2 different paragraphs, that we can have that discussion, or whether you want to leave it exactly as is.
Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, do you have authorization to spend additional monies outside or above contracts when changes come along and those types of things? Is that already within your scope?
There's a percentage, I want to say, in code. First, we make sure it's budgeted. Is the dollar amount or the budget authority been granted? Then the statutory cap, I can't sign for more than 80,000, so those all come through. And then there is a percentage of a contract that I do have the flexibility on. Although in this case, I would look at this very specific. If what the motion and the action is not to exceed a number, then I do not exceed that number without authorization from this body. You're clear, there's our number.
Thank you.
Councilor Manise.
Mayor, I didn't support this when the first time it came around, and so I won't support the motion. I understand it'll move forward. I think, Mayor, when you said the MRM was going to charge us $500,000, we were going to get it wasn't free to us, and that's true. The city is not paying for it, but there's a cost to that. And when we look at the MRM and other organizations, for instance, like the Salvation Army, the event I was at this weekend, there's a lot of private donations that are going into these organizations outside of government. Yes, government may support some of those, and they may get some grants from governments, but most of these organizations are coming with a lot of public donations. And I was concerned that this area here, while they did have some donations and it did have some help maybe in years prior, this year there didn't seem to be any private donations, and they needed that money advanced to them because they don't have the money. There's no money in this operation, and if they don't get the money up front, then they can't continue to operate. So it would have been nice to see some private funds coming to support this, and we know there's the public behind it. As it is now, it appears to me that it's just a group. And yeah, the COC, it's a large group, and it's an important group of the city, but we don't have the community support backing it financially. And so I won't support this. I think this is a duplication of services. I think the rescue mission does their job, and we're seeing them stepping up and doing more. And so I'll leave it at that, and thank you.
Okay, further, Councilmember Purinton?
Just one other question that I have regarding this. And Chris, you answered most of my questions, but the one question that I didn't get answered was, in that agreement, it was providing for quarterly reports, but yet we're only at 5 months of operation. So quarterly reports every 3 months. So I'm not understanding the duration of those reports, and also the extent of quarterly reports when we have to have these monthly reports.
So the monthly is the reimbursement. We'll see the receipts and determine how close was the $37,000 estimate per month, and they'll be reimbursed less $9,000 each month, so we can get our 45 back. So that's the financial component of the transaction. Their quarterly report is reporting on the actions, the services, the things of that nature. And so we get a mid, I would say with a 6-month contract, essentially 5 or 6, we're going to get a report midway through, and we're going to get a report in the end on services. Monthly, we're going to see cost expenses.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to make just to keep this moving, I'd hate to see Skid wrap around the axle over this change in amount. I'm going to make a motion to amend the motion down from the 231 staff report number to the budgeted, the amount shown in the budget of $221,250, with the justification being that that's still $10,000 more than we were talking about the last time we headed in this direction. But I don't see any reason to approve $10,000 that are not being asked for. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Okay, so that's the proposed amendment. We'll discuss that and then have a vote on that and see where that goes. Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder, could we ask Carrie Boyder to come up and tell us about the impact of this decision?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Carrie. You've been hearing the discussion. Just tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, so when you approved the $210,000 amount, that left an $8,400 additional expenditure that we could use for capital startup costs. So when we drafted the contract with the reimbursement terms with Andy, we set that for a $10,000 total amount up to be spent on that capital expenditure. So within the contracts, there's the flexibility to spend up to $10,000 of the initial $45,000 payment on capital expenses. And so, for example, we did have to bring in an architect to do a code analysis on the building. So we're going to have an expenditure for that. And then we have the marshals, fire marshal and building inspector coming in this week. And we don't know exactly yet what they're going to require. So for example, a fire door or something like this would just allow us the flexibility within what's already in the contract to be able to provide those expenditures to you, have them signed off on, and then have that all worked into the reimbursement that's already in the contract. If that makes sense.
Well, I'm not sure it does. So the 221,250 that's in our budget, you got to help her. We're going to explain this. It includes the United Way fees. So if you Continuum of Care United Way gets 221,250, are you good?
So essentially, the cleanest way to do it is going to be, it was 210. We wrote all the contracts with the $45,000 expenditure, got all the way to the point where we realized the Continuum of Care can't sign this contract with the city, and then we added in that 21,000. So everything we did was based on, say hi, go ahead, get it out of your system.
Hi.
Everything we did in the contract and the budget was based off of having that 10,000, up to 10,000 for capital expenditures. That's not necessarily budgeted in. Go ahead. Okay. That's not necessarily budgeted in, my apologies. But we know we will have some expenses, especially because we had to turn this around so quickly. So we did have to do a code analysis. That wasn't a plan for expense in the budget, for
Lots of
example.
detail here that we're getting lost in, right? So the question was, if you get 221,250, are you good?
It will leave us
What
with
I
some unpaid bills.
Say was yes, unless you have big capital costs over and that are not included in that 221. Is that?
And we do already have some capital costs above and beyond that 221 that aren't in that budget, that we had based on what the contract was written with the $45,000 upfront payment. That was essentially 1 month of operational expenses, and then the additional 10,000 is what that provided for, that could be used with receipts for actuals for things like this code analysis, for
So
example.
the 221 doesn't include those capital needs.
It does not, no, that's correct. That's just the operational costs and then the United Way broken out over the term of the contract. So that way, if we do end early, United Way's fee would also be lowered in relation.
Okay, and how much do you expect those capital costs to be?
Not more than 10,000 according to the contract. We cannot exceed that amount. We'll know a lot more this week. The first payment that's upfront is $45,000. So that's 1 month of operational plus up to 10,000 for capital is the way the contract specifies it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We'll continue our discussion and come back to that issue. I saw Councilmember Purinton's hand and Councilmember Neese.
Well, and that kind of leads to another question, because it was blank in the agreement, sort of left blank, was how many people this would actually house. So whenever you look at your budget, I would think that you're looking at a certain amount of individuals that you would serve, but yet, is this going to equate with what the fire marshal says you can or cannot do? So I just feel like there's some unanswered questions. I don't have a problem with this, doing this. I mean, I've been on board to say, okay, we can do this. I just kind of have a problem. It's like, and I'm sorry, Chris, to me, it's like there's so many unknowns that we're going, well, we're just going to give you this money. Yeah, you're going to tell us what we've asked for, but we don't know actually what we're asking for because we're not expecting a certain amount of people.
So I think specific to the question of what we know or we don't know, the agreement does require that I'm trying to find the section we talked about this morning, is it section 7, compliance with laws in general. So the facility, for obvious reasons, has to comply with building code, local, county, state, federal rules. So, yep, anytime something can happen that's unanticipated before you actually sign the contract, with the contract clear, you need to follow those rules.
Okay, Councilor Renese?
Mayor, this amendment is for the dollar amount only, correct?
That's right.
Okay, and then are you going to, this may be out of order, but just quick, are you going to bring some language changes to this agreement later?
That would be my expectation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ripsis.
Carrie, the estimate here, the budget here assumes full months, November 1st through April 30th. We're already November 14th. Are we going to experience some savings because we're not opening already?
We likely will, and then that will be, since we're only paying on a monthly basis, whatever isn't spent would just not be expended out to us.
Would that then allow you to meet the budget with the 221 number instead of the 231 number?
Potentially, we just don't know because we have our operationals pretty fixed in based on what our past experience was. It's really, the fire marshal and building inspectors recommended a code analysis, so we brought an architect in to do that. We've presented that to them. They have to come back to do one more final check Thursday. Based on that, what they tell us, it could be a low amount based on only the architect, or it could be some additional amounts. So this is just trying to cover the partner's cost on what would be required to bring that facility up to.
Councilor
Thank you.
Ripson?
Yes, just one follow-up, Chris. If we got to the end of April and it's the last 2 weeks of April and it's still snowing and we want to keep this going, but we've tapped the budget at 221, could we do an amendment at that point to extend for the final $10,000, or just make the decision at that point, if it's beautiful and the flowers are growing, that we're good, we're shut it down now?
If additional dollars are needed beyond what the contract, what you authorize, then we would need to come back to you and ask for that. And so based on the weather projections, at that time, certainly if the COC is saying, boy, weather looks like we're going to be sub-zero into April, then I assume we're going to be back here unless they have donations saying, okay, this is what we're short. Do you support extending it, or are we done?
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the proposed amendment to the motion before we go to a vote on that? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. This is not a question, but I will support the motion. I do understand that they're in a situation of not knowing exactly what their capital expenses will be, but I think that they've done their background, they've worked hard at trying to figure out what their costs will be, and I will support the motion to set that dollar amount as it was proposed. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor McGeelick.
I just recognize that I'm going to need to recuse myself from this vote because I am the architect, actually, was referenced. We've done past work with that church, and so I know already have past code analysis to work from, so better recuse myself.
Very good. Thank you for reminding us of that. Are we ready to vote on the proposed amendment? Okay, so again, we're now voting on only the amendment, which is to change the dollar amount to the $221,250 shown on Exhibit C, as opposed to the original number, which was $231. If this passes, I would anticipate further discussion on the then amended motion, including language changes or anything else the council wanted to go. Is the proposed amendment clear? Okay, so if in favor of the proposed amendment, please, let's do a show of hands. Raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Neese, Owen, Joy, Cole, Tidswell, Parrington, and Rupses. So, and if voting in opposition, raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmember Shaw, Chiriki, and Boyette. Councilmember Gulick recused himself. So the motion passes. So the number in front of us now is 221, approval of the 221 number. There are some proposed language changes, Council. I'll go ahead and address those now if that's okay with you. I had two concerns. I don't know, you call these large or medium or minor, but the first one is in Exhibit B of the program and services requirements. So if this were approved, we would be approving with this change. The second sentence under safety procedures, and kind of in the middle of the page, says grantee, that would be the United Way, also acknowledges that any staff, agents, or sub-grantees shall follow all required safety protocols of the city while they are on site. My concern with that is it clearly suggests there will be safety protocols of the city. And I'm not sure that's the case. It makes me a little nervous to think that the city would be developing its own safety protocols, because if there were an accident or a problem, they're our protocols. And kind of clearly makes us a partner in this venture as opposed to just a pure provider of money, and increases our liability risk. And if we didn't create those protocols, well, and there was a problem, well, then we would get sued for not creating the safety protocols that we kind of said that we would create. So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, I'm afraid. So I would suggest changing that language to say grantee also acknowledges that any staff, agents, or sub-grantees shall follow all required, and then delete safety protocols of the city, and instead say required building codes, zoning codes, state and federal, or state, federal, and other local regulations and industry practices. So just saying if there's codes and laws out there, those will be followed. Now there's other language elsewhere in the agreement that kind of already says that, but it gets rid of this concept of safety protocols of the city. Councilmember Boyette.
Can I ask Gina to follow in on this?
I would. I haven't made a motion. This is just sort of general discussion. So, Gina, can you weigh in?
Yeah.
Absolutely. As I said in my email earlier today, I and the mayor just indicated there are some other provisions in the contract that I think cover some of these things, but this is an appropriate change, and I think it would help to clarify the concern that the mayor has.
Councilmember Neese, did you have anything before we?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I'll convert what I said into a motion. In other words, it is to change that sentence to delete safety protocols of the city, those 5 words, and replace it with the phrase building codes, zoning codes, and other local, state, and other local, state, federal, and other regulations and industry practices. Councilmember Rupses indicated a second. A discussion on the proposed amendment. Councilmember Parrington.
Since there are other entities like the church that are involved in this, I'm wondering, whenever they had the low barrier shelter previously last winter, were there not agreements that had this type of language in it that we could use, or I don't know if it was appropriate language that would cover, all the bases? I just think yours sounds really wordy. I don't know that there's a more succinct way to say all of that. But were there not other protocols in place when they had other low barrier shelters?
Reinvent the wheel.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. Can anybody answer that question? Okay, Carrie, come in. So the question again was, when does the city have safety protocols for these?
No. No. Last year, when they had the low barrier shelter, you had the crisis center, you had the church involved. So I'm sure there were already agreements among those entities for safety protocols or safety procedures. So I understand that you don't want to have the city in that because it opens us up for some liability, and I understand that. But I'm just wondering, are there not very general safety procedures that, because to me, it falls on the continuum of care.
Sure. So the question is, do these organizations have those
Right.
protocols? Great. Carrie?
Yes, so this Exhibit B specifically is language from another city in Montana and what they do with their low barrier shelter agreements. So what we had previously isn't the same governance structure because it's actually pared down and much more simplified. But essentially, we do have policies and procedures, a whole manual that we're going to continue to use. And under the terms of the contract, it says we must turn that manual over to you all as part of that agreement. So you'll be able to, at some point, I assume, the attorney and Chris would be able to look at what those policies and procedures are. It's 26-page manual with everything from unaccompanied minors to child safety policies to, evacuation procedures, everything that's basically called for in the contract, or I think it might actually be in the scope of the services, where it says, disaster response and recovery plan, shelter, housekeeping, maintenance, storage of personal property, all that's in our policy manual.
Okay, so the question then, to me, Mr. Mayor, would go back to Gina, that, to me, the first sentence would take care of that, because it goes back to the grantee.
I think that, like I said earlier, that there is language in the contract and in this exhibit that addresses that, but, and I understand that you're concerned when you hear the sentence as read by the mayor, it might sound a little wordy, but when you are looking at it on paper, it is actually very clear and it is easily understandable, at least it is to me. And so by the way, there aren't any other agreements that we could pull some language from because we weren't a partner in that last year. So, we can't steal any language from another contract, and so I would suggest that you just adopt the language as proposed by the mayor. I think it is good language, and I think it's clear when you look at it in writing.
That's because we're talking to two attorneys.
There you go. Yeah.
And they will agree.
He's not charging you by the word.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so further discussion now on the proposed amendment. Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the key is this is a grant, and we want to make sure we're not imposing the city. The city doesn't want to be liable, and I appreciate you looking at that, because it appears to me that if this contract was copied from another city who's running their low barrier shelter, they may have those security protocols in place. We do not have that, and so thank you for catching that. And I just want to make sure that they are legal, as they did say they reviewed this contract. So if there's any other thing referring to city run, I'm hoping that's not in there. And I think this is an easy change, so I'll support your amendment.
Okay, anything else before we proceed to a vote? Okay, so we'll now have a vote. Again, the motion is to change that language about requiring following safety protocols in cities to instead just say follow required building codes, zoning codes, and all other local, state, and federal regulations and industry practices. If in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all council members. If voting in opposition, Councilmember Gulick is still the architect. He hasn't been fired in the interim, so he recused himself. Okay, so that's what's now before you. There was one other issue. I'm content to just flag this issue without bringing an amendment, just to alert people. There is, and it was referenced before, there's been discussion between the city and the Continuum of Care and First Church about zoning approvals, and Carrie, or I'm sorry, probably not zoning approvals, but building code approvals and making changes and all of those things. The argument could be made that if we now approve this, having had those discussions and knowing generally what's proposed for that space, some might argue that, well, you've approved these permits, these building permits that are being contemplated. I just want to make sure there's no disagreement between the parties that that's not the case, that those are separate, independent, made by other people in the city besides the city council or building division, and that by approving this agreement, we're not committing to approve any particular land use permit, building permit, or anything like that. This is completely separate. I assume the council would agree with that. Carrie, I'm just going to ask you on the record, sort of, if you can just confirm for us that that's your understanding, that if we approve this agreement, it's a funding mechanism. It doesn't in any way commit the city to approve anything when it comes to a building permit or land use approvals.
Yep, that's correct. And I think it does actually cover under maximum capacity. It shall not exceed the limit established by the city, fire department, and buildings. So it shows that that hasn't been done yet within the contract that you'd be signing.
Great. So as long as that's clear and we're all on the same page, that's great.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion now. You have an amended motion before you at the $221,250 with a little bit of wording change. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. While I supported the amendments to the contract, I still am going to support, I don't support this contract, so I will be opposing it. Thank you.
Okay, for Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to commend and thank and extend our appreciation to Chris and Gina and Carrie and everybody at the COC and Crisis Continuum Center and the church for making this happen, putting in the work to get this going. I know it was a lot of work. It took longer than anybody had hoped, and the first storm came sooner than anybody had hoped, but hopefully this is up and running soon, and thank you all for your hard work on this.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I would just like to kind of build a little bit off of what Councilmember Reps has said. We've been through a very long process with this, and I really do appreciate the hard work of everyone involved, city staff and both the nonprofits that are working through this and the partners of the COC. This has been a very long process. It's been very difficult, and it is not easy to just fund and build a shelter for a specific amount of time for a specific purpose and without agreeing to any kind of land use issues. So, you know, it's a very good accomplishment. And although I know, I'm not sure where this motion will go in terms of whether, the amended motion is now for a different amount of money. I really do appreciate the hard work that's gone into this. And, if fundraising has to be done, be sure to come to council and tell us you're fundraising. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amended motion before we proceed to a vote? Okay, we'll proceed to the vote. Is the now amended motion clear to everyone? Okay, if in favor of the amended motion, we'll do a hand count. Please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the amended motion. Councilmembers Shaw, Owen, Joy, Cole, Chariki, Tidswell, Parrington, and Rupsis. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmembers Neese and Boyette. Councilmember Neese abstains. So the motion passes 8 to. I'm sorry? Gulick, I'm sorry. Motion passes 8 to 2. That concludes the first separated item, number 1A. Yeah, at this pace, let's see. Okay, but very important, and we appreciate everybody's input on that item. Item 1C, I forget whose, that was yours, Councilmember Parrington?
Yeah. At this time, I cannot support developing or paying for the master plan for Cottonwood until we get our parks funding squared away. I don't see adding more to this, and how many times we've had master plans on parks, and 10 years later, have to go back and get another one. So at this point, I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion, Councilmember Gulick and then Shaw.
Thank you. I will support it. I think to Councilmember Parrington's concern, I recognize that. I think it's really helpful to have plans, though, in place so we have some understanding of what does it take to develop a park, and thus what kind of capital investments do we need to raise, or private sector, donate, all those things. I think this is something that was funded by previous council, and I think these are a wise investment for planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I move to approve item 1C.
Okay, motion was for approval of item 1C by Councilmember Shaw, seconded by Councilmember Joy. Councilmember Shaw, you wanted to speak to your motion.
I do, thank you. I will just make the case that without a master plan, it's very difficult to go after any kind of grant, pretty much impossible. So if we're hoping to move forward with developing this at some point, getting a master plan on the books earlier rather than later is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And it's also important to remember that when we've had parks, that sometimes nonprofits and fundraising that has paid for a piece of master planning. This particular park isn't identified as a Landon's Legacy type of park, but at the same time, it really is our vision as a city and as a community as to what it should look like. And I think that we've talked about funding for parks over a long period of time, and one of the things that I thought I've heard quite often from the council is that there's part of this that is actually the city's piece of what it takes to make a park, like putting in the watering system, those kinds of infrastructure things where we have private fundraising, where they want to put in benches or shelters, understandable fundraising. But a master plan is fundamental to what goes forward. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese. And
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Ripsis.
Quick question for the Parks Director. What is the source of these funds?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Neese, the master plan would be funded by cash in lieu funds that's been dedicated to Cottonwood Park.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I'll be supporting this motion. I think that we need to really said, I didn't like it when we had to use cash in lieu funds for Castle Rock Park Master Plan. I don't think that's what they're designed for. We were under pressure to try to get that park improvements that were missing for quite a while, and so we kind of caved in and used some of those funds, the cash in lieu funds for that. And I don't think that should be a practice. I think we need to use that for development. Sooner than later, I agree a master plan needs to be done, but I don't agree with the use of cash in lieu funds for this. So I won't support this motion either.
Thank you. Councilor Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I just had a question. One of the other items, we didn't have any of the contracts included with the the memo materials here. This one we don't, and there's another one, I think 1E, that also there were no it says we're approving a contract or services agreement, but we don't actually see the agreement. Is this an issue for us?
The contracts should be attached to the packet material. That's our general practice. So the fact that it was not was a error somewhere in the process. Can we not ultimately approve a not to exceed $115,000 to conduct a master plan for Cottonwood Park? I think it provides us the guidance to do exactly that, because there's enough specificity in what we're doing in a master planning process. But we did have that conversation, and my apologies, the contract should be attached to the items.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Owen, and I'd like to come back to that issue, just we'll have to clarify who has to approve the contract before I sign anyway. Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, I didn't mean to cut you off if you wanted to
No,
continue.
no.
Well, so if we'd had the contract, I would know the answer to this question. But since we don't, Chris, how are we handling SEPTED in this master planning process?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. Councilmember Owens, could you repeat that question?
Yep, we've talked quite a bit at council about SEPTED, and so we've talked about incorporating it throughout the city practices, and so my question is, how are we thinking about it here in the master plan? Are you asking them to incorporate principles? When they bring back the master plan, are you gonna look it over with some SEPTED people? What are we doing here to ensure that we're designing this park to be safe?
Councilmember Owens, it's my understanding it's in the scope of work that the firm looks at the master plan from a SEPTED principle.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've said this from the first day I signed on here, is I really don't want to be building more parks when we haven't finished the parks we have. I mean, it seems crazy to me to build more and more, and then the park's going to say, well, geez, we need more people to keep them, we have to fund more to do this and this when we haven't finished the ones we have. I just can't support building a new park when we haven't finished what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to that issue of what exactly are we approving? I'm the one who has to sign these things, and I'm happy to do so, but I guess I would ask for some clarification and basically a friendly motion by our movant, Councilmember Shaw, and second by Councilmember Joy, that if this motion passes, that the city administrator and city attorney be given the authority to pass on any final contract to me to be signed without having come back to the council. I don't think that's a big issue in this case. We've done lots of work with Land Design Inc. This is a fairly standard document, but I guess I would like some clarification that I actually have authority to sign this thing once they have approved it, they being the city administrator and city attorney. Is that acceptable to the
I
movement?
have no problem with that.
Okay. Okay, so that's part of that motion. Further discussion now on the motion. Councilmember Neese.
So if the council is giving you authority to sign the contract and you see something that, for instance, SEPTED principles are not in the scope of work, you would then not sign the contract and have to bring it back to council, or would you just add that or make changes to the contract and bring it back to us?
My understanding is that if this is passed, we are granting the city administrator in consultation with the city attorney to negotiate changes to the contract. I might alert them to that, but I don't think you're giving me the authority to negotiate the contract on your behalf. You're giving it to them and for me to sign it. So we'd need to get their approval, and I'd like to put that primary responsibility on them, although of course I can keep my eyes open for things.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and so if I understand, then we're going to approve the council, approving a contract the council have not seen or read yet.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, is the motion clear enough for us to proceed to a vote? Okay, so if in favor of the motion, this is item 1C, consultant agreement with Land Design Inc. to develop master plan for Cottonwood Park. Please raise your hand. Voting in favor, council members Shaw, Gillick, Owen, Joy, Cole, Chiriki, and whatever your name is down there, Rupsis. So that's, okay. And then voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Neese, Tidswell, Parrington, and Boyette. So the motion passes 6-4. 7-4. Thank you. That's right. Councilmember Gulick is not recusing himself on this. Thank you. Next item 1D, construction agreement for closure acquisition. I think that was separate from Councilmember Owen?
It was. Thank you, Mayor. This poor little beleaguered property in the Heights. So I asked for this to be separated because I'm honestly just having a really hard time with this project, quite candidly. I think obviously this property has been owned by the city for some time. There has been multiple efforts on the part of the city to do something here. And I think council has had some good conversations about trying to do things that are more innovative, more forward thinking, to try to be a better partner in working with the private sector to solve a problem. And I think we fell short here, unfortunately. And so I have a couple of concerns that I want to raise about this. I don't have any illusion that this agreement won't get approved. I'm sure it will. But I have some concerns that I wanted to put on the record. And then I'm gonna urge the council to reject it, although I think I know where the votes are on this. So I'm disappointed that we're going to do nothing more than simply stick a modular home in a neighborhood. The staff memo clearly outlines their heartburn with the idea of doing something more innovative, but that's a binary choice, right? We could do lots of different things that are more innovative. The idea of the city being the first partner to bring 3D printed homes to the community was really exciting. Maybe that doesn't work, maybe it does. But I'm concerned here that we just sort of settled with a modular home. In fact, the proposals have gone out from the city multiple times for just modular homes. And it is a strange piece of property. It's a little bit narrow. It sort of lends itself to thinking that way. But I'm not convinced we did our best here to really say, we have this piece of land, we have a housing crisis, what's the best, most important, most impactful thing that we can do? I'm really concerned and really disheartened with the way the staff memo characterizes this entire process, quite frankly, in addition to the tone it takes with our municipal housing agency, Homefront. They are our partner in developing housing policy for the city. This staff memo seems to characterize them as failing to meet some sort of deadline. But I don't think that's a fair characterization, quite frankly. This was not an RFP process. RFP after RFP had failed, and the city staff had been authorized to go out and just ask people to submit bids. Those deadlines were our made-up deadlines. They were a flexible bid solicitation process, not an RFP. If we'd wanted to do something innovative, we could have. We could have said, you know what? No, we don't want to do just a modular. We want to try something innovative. Maybe it's 3D printed homes, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's 2 homes on the site, maybe it's 4. But nothing in here convinces me that we did everything that we could to try to be as innovative, creative, and address the density issues that we've talked about, the need for housing that we've talked about. I just think we came up short here. I would suggest that whether or not we believe that the Homefront 3D printed home proposal was the right one, the idea of simply settling for a singular modular home is on its own not very good. So I'm going to make a motion that we reject the construction agreement and final work list. I'm not going to suggest that we accept the Homefront project, but simply that we maybe try again to do something as creative and innovative, maximizing our housing capacity, addressing density, and trying to do a little bit better. So that will be my motion, that we reject this agreement tonight.
I'll second that.
Okay, I heard Councilmember Neese first, so, so for the motion is for rejection. Discussion now on the motion.
If I could just say one more thing, Mayor, before you go on. I did have a meeting last night with our city administrator and with Director Friday, and it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate it. I know they understand at least my desire, and I hope the rest of the council's desire to be more innovative and creative. We talked about the $900,000 and change that council has put into affordable housing and how we can engage more effectively with the development community. I think very few developers are aware that we have those dollars out, so I know we're moving in the right direction. I just think that plopping a modular home on this piece of property isn't the best we can do. So, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Purinton.
Thank you. Jennifer, I'm glad that you brought that up because that was exactly what I had in mind. I think that Billings has missed the mark for being a forerunner with possibly 3D housing. It is a new, creative, innovative, visionary sort of concept. And there's so many times that they say, well, council lacks vision. And I'm sitting here going, well, okay. I would have been excited to see this. I think this would have been a great way to move forward and to have a better land use, if you will. Yeah, we would have had to change the zoning. I think that would have gone okay. But I just think we too, or, staff in making this presentation, we missed the mark. I do think that we missed the mark on this. And I don't want to vote for a modular home. I'm just saying that.
Okay, see a lot of hands down here. We'll need staff to comment on, of course, the feasibility of options here. I'm sorry, what, I saw a lot of hands down here. Councilmember Gulick and Councilmember Shaw. I think Councilmember Joy, you had your hand up.
I better recuse myself again. My senior partner, Randy Hafer, had put together the sketch you saw for the rejected option there, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I don't know who can answer this, but I'd like to hear how far along in the process this is. I mean, has a down payment been put on a modular home? Where are we if this gets rejected tonight?
Okay, so we'll ask Brenda to comment, and if I can ask her to expand also just on what our options are with that property more generally. You've heard the discussion, Brenda, so comment as you would like.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, let me just go back to an initial comment that we only looked at modular houses. We actually didn't. The first request for proposals was affordable housing development. It needs to be a one-for-one replacement unit for home ownership because that's what we took down, and CDBG requires one-for-one replacement. We've actually sent this land and the affordable housing development application to every housing developer we can think of to ask them to bid or to submit an affordable housing development application. And we never received any applications after at least the initial process. And subsequently, we thought, well, we have building supply issues, we have contractor issues, we have workforce issues. Maybe a modular is the way to go on that, for that project. I would caution the City Council about delaying on building on this property. We do not have an accepted comprehensive annual performance evaluation report that was submitted to HUD at the end of September. And HUD has already questioned the length of time it has taken us to get any kind of proposal for any kind of developer willing to take on this project. So I would just, caution the council on that. But I know that there's a land inventory being put together, and any organization can put an application through the Affordable Housing Development Program. So that would be a great way to support both, 3D printed housing and also support an application for funding with the more details that we need in order to be able to adequately fund that kind of a project. I'm sorry, I'm like really short of breath tonight because I have some chest cold issues, but so that's, yeah. Did I answer everything?
Councilmember Shaw, that was your question
Thank you.
initially.
Yes, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. I agree with you, and I agree with Councilmember Owen. So I think I really appreciated all the points that she made, and I'm hoping our development community hears that loud and clear. But I will vote against the motion for the reasons that you identified. Thank you.
You can absolutely do a 3D house. We can make that happen.
Brenda, if I can just ask you, there was discussion about 3D printing option there. Is this site capable of a product that where you could use 3D printing, and do you have a developer who would do it on this site?
That is I am not qualified to answer that question. It is, the lot is only 66 feet wide, so I'm not sure how large the machines need to be and, placed in order to operate that. Yeah, I'm not qualified.
Okay, on the technical side, but do you have a developer who's asked you to let them build something using the 3D process on this site?
Just the information, the couple of pages we received from Homefront on that. Like, it's kind of like a concept paper that they submitted, yeah.
Okay, all right. Chris, you want to chime in?
Mayor and Council, the piece I would add, and Brenda was traveling, jealous, I wish I were traveling where she was, but while she was out, I did have the opportunity to, in this case, to speak with Homefront, speak with, for lack of a better term, the contractor, the individual who says he has the equipment and wants to develop 3D printed homes in the community, and I spoke to the architect, all of which confirm that they think they can do something on this site. I do think, and I think, I apologize if I believe we reference it in the memo, I think if we get past 2 units on the site, whether it's a variance or a deviation, I think we did determine we don't need to do a zone change, but there's an impact relative to the land use process for more than 2 units. Again, doesn't mean we can't do it, but we can't promise anybody, including ourselves, that they will make it through the process. So more than 2 units, we will need to do some land use decisions at this table, but specific to the question and having a conversation directly with architect, 3D printer, they indicated that they could work with this site. Now, I think in fairness to them and us, all of that, I think, is in the vein of preliminarily. None of that was at the level of, designed right down to the foot.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Councilmember Troy, is it okay if I go to our planning director, Wyeth Friday? Wyeth, what can you add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Hopefully you can hear me, and I'll be brief because Chris hit on a little bit of this. I just want to be real clear. I guess I'm concerned because I feel like we're pitting like creativity and new ideas versus process and timing and when information is provided to the city and the staff to be able to make decisions and provide information to council. And so I guess, the fact that there's the potential that something could be done differently on this site is real, and it's actually been there for 2.5 years since the city acquired the site, demoed the structure, and began the process of soliciting proposals to do development on the site. And so part of the real challenge here, I think mainly is that we are, we finally have a proposal, we finally have, the details, information we need to be able to do this with the HUD funding and those requirements, and we have ideas that are not fully developed but are interesting and could certainly have potential. And so I think the idea there of like looking at other properties and other opportunities where something like this could really come to fruition and gel is a great idea and a great way to approach it. But I think I am very concerned at this property, at this situation right now, that we do not have the information, have not been provided the information at the right timing to actually be able to give the council what they would need to make an informed decision there. And if we continue to delay this on this specific property, we may run into other concerns with HUD and with those funding because we don't know how long that could take. So I just wanted to share that. It has nothing to do with the creativity. The 3D printing is brand new. We are certainly at the beginning of that, the edge of that type of development and structure. And so, yeah, I anticipate we're going to see that happen in the community in the future. So I just wanted to share that, I guess, just with the concerns with the mechanics of this and the timing. Thanks.
So if I can try to pin you down there a little bit, what I'm hearing you say is if we do not spend this money now, we may lose it.
Councilman,
And if so, can you tell us the odds of our losing it if we do not spend it now?
I would have to defer a little bit here to Brenda on the specifics. Our issue is that we have HUD funds that we have to obligate, and we need to obligate some of the funds. We're going to come up in April to another expenditure deadline with HUD on our overall program, and so being able to get some of this funding obligated now is really important. Or we could have them say, what they call it is a finding, and Brenda could describe that, and they would say, what are you doing? How come you're not expending more of your program funds in a timely manner? So that's really the situation.
Okay, Brenda can comment on that later. Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Actually, my question was going to be to Ms. Beckett about this issue of timing, because this property has been there for a very long time. The pandemic hit. I mean, it's been through a lot. And I know that the timing is very important because in previous projects that sitting on the CBD I have heard about, in previous projects, there's a point at which once the property is bought, you have to have the project done. If you don't have the project done, there are real consequences for that. So I just wanted you to go ahead and explain that better to council. Thank you.
Sure. The best way I can explain it to you is to describe a couple of properties that the city owned and currently still owns pieces of those properties on South 27th Street. Those properties were purchased by the city in the 1980s, I believe, and the city purchased those with CDBG funding. When I took over the position in 2005, we were still paying property disposition on those properties, and HUD reviewed our comprehensive annual performance evaluation report and had a finding about those properties because we kept paying weeds and we kept paying snow and for snow removal. We were required to repay HUD the current assessed value or the current appraised property value back with non-federal funding. So that was a huge hit for the city in a way. So they're looking at this property specifically. They submitted questions. I can't remember exactly when, Wyeth, but they submitted questions. It's been a month or so ago about Stefanich in their IDIS reporting system about why there's a vacancy, why we don't have that property completed. And TAM had to provide information for that. I'm just kind of waiting to see if we're going to have a finding on that property or not. So I'm expecting we're going to have a finding with that property. We do have timeliness issues regarding expenditures. We missed our timeliness expenditure deadline last May because the Western Hotel project fell through. So that was a real specific issue that we had, and it fell through in April, right before our timeliness deadline hit, which was like May 2nd. So we're going to run into that again this upcoming year. We keep receiving high amounts of program income and revenue. I don't have those figures because this is my first day back in a while, so I don't have those figures on exactly how much needs to be spent. My larger concern is that if we don't move forward on this project, we're going to run into property disposition issues with HUD and potentially have to repay the current appraised value for the land.
Okay, Councilmember Neese, Boyette, Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I don't know the whole process you have to go through, Brenda, but I would hope that when they look at this and we're considering maybe 4 properties, 4 housing units versus 1, that would go a long way to help, to alleviate or extend any deadlines. But I don't know that. You know better than I do on that. But I guess the question I have is, the money doesn't have to be spent on this project. So what other projects can this money be spent on if the council turns us down? Because as I heard that, again, this is new technology that they were talking about, it's on the edge. And so it wasn't prepared enough, I guess, for this particular project. But it may be in 6 months or 3 months or whatever it may be. And maybe next year we can apply to this property or some other property. We don't have to spend the money on this project, correct? We can spend it on other projects, is that right?
I would highly recommend that the contract go through and the funding be spent on this project to move it forward for expenditures by next summer.
I understand, but the money doesn't have to be spent on this project,
We
correct?
have no other projects in the pipeline.
Okay, so there's no other projects out there, no other backup projects or anything like that? Okay, thank you.
I just want to make a comment too on the 4 units. We've had some discussions questions and concerns from the neighbors about putting multifamily or number of units on that property. As soon as they found out the city owned that property, we're looking at affordable housing development. They were very concerned that we were going to put a high rise there. So I think if there were to be a number of units on that property, we would need to make sure that neighborhood work was completed in order to inform the neighbors and give them a say about how that would change their neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Purinton, you had some comments? No? Oh, okay. Okay. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Shaw.
Okay, Mayor, I can't support denying this. This is a perfect deal. Let's move on. If we want to do what do you call it? 3D homes. I talked with a builder and he says, great idea, but why don't you pick a specific area with a specific project? Don't pick something that we've been working on for a long time and change in the middle of the stream. So I think we need to go back and do this one. 3D is a great idea, but let's move it for something for the future, pick a project and then isolate it. So I can't vote in favor of the denial.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I'd like to make a substitute motion to approve item 1D.
Okay, second by Councilmember Boyette. Yeah, I apologize, didn't realize we didn't have any sort of motion on the floor.
You did.
I'm sorry,
made
this
it.
was a substitute motion,
Yes.
gotcha, okay, yep. So this would be a substitute motion for approval.
Yes.
Okay, and second by Councilmember Boyette, so that's the discussion now. Councilmember Owen, you're looking puzzled.
Well, somebody passed me a note, and I don't know who it was. I don't know if that was you. I just wanted to note that our housing partner, Patty Webster, is on.
Oh.
And I think she might want to offer some comments. And I also just wanted to be clear, because I feel like my comments are being misconstrued. I'm not suggesting that we pick one project or the other. I'm just suggesting we could have done better on this property. So with that, I don't know if, I find it valuable to have Patty's input when we talk about housing issues in the community.
Yeah, was Patty available? Yes. Unless somebody objects, that would be great. Let's hear from Patty Webster, our Housing Authority Director, Homefront. Patty Webster, welcome, Patty. Have you caught this? If so, educate us.
Hi, good evening, Council, Mayor, City staff. I just want to say that I support any kind of housing that we can add to the City of Billings coffers. The one thing that I completely agree with Brenda and Wyatt in that I know that they have had deadlines, they have expenditure requirements that need to be made, money needs to be obligated and expended within certain timelines, and I completely appreciate that. I am very concerned that our behavior and our actions at Homefront were misrepresented to the council, and it's more of a reputation issue for me at this point. We were not late in submitting something. There was no formal deadline. Our application wasn't incomplete. We were told to submit information, and Pam gave us the requirements that she had given to the modular home, and so that is what we answered. I just don't want us to be misrepresented, and making it seem that we are unprofessional, incomplete, and inadequate in being able to do our jobs, because that is exactly what this feels like to me, and that's not okay. Furthermore, I support the city in their decision to do whatever they need to do to make this project work. It's a step in its drive project. We've already moved on. We're going to do 3D printed housing on property that we own, Homefront owns, out in the Heights. We wanted this to be a win-win for the city. We wanted the city of Billings to be the first to be able to sponsor a 3D project in the state of Montana. Pam didn't come to us. I actually invited her over to visit with Tim Stark and Randy and some of my staff so that she could learn about 3D printed housing and see there's all kinds of 3D printers and different things, but I really want, I'm concerned that dots are not connected here. I'm concerned that we're not taking a yes and attitude about different innovative projects here in the city, and not so much that this project had to work on that site, but when we have opportunities like this to meet with different kinds of developers like Tim Stark, that we could jump on something like that, right? That we would be available and able to enhance an opportunity that comes available as a city, instead of having to, put one project down over another. Again, my main concern is that Homefront was misrepresented. Again, we were not late, we were not incomplete. We provided the information we were asked to. I submitted emails to Chris Kuczewski earlier last week to show him that exactly what was asked of us, and that there were no deadlines. Is that correct? Chris had actually said that it was just kind of up in the air, and I understand that the city has deadlines, and I want to support whatever project they're going to do. But this project also would have been able to help the city's first-time homebuyer program. It wasn't two duplexes either. It was actually single-family homes that we would have had to condo. And again, we were never asked any questions after we submitted our proposal. I just think that there's a better way to do business. And I'm all about wanting to build bridges. I told Chris I didn't ask any questions because, quite frankly, I've spent the last 3.5 years trying to build bridges back with the city. And I feel that challenging something or asking questions makes us appear as we are difficult and they're not wanting to partner, and that is actually not the case at all.
Okay, thank you.
And,
Thank you, Patty. Thank you for that clarification. Anything else to wrap up there?
I'm sorry?
Thank you for that clarification. Was there anything else that you wanted to, before we move on?
No, that's all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
You bet. Thank you. Very good. Appreciate that clarification. Further discussion now, we do have the substitute motion in front of us. So the discussion is on the substitute motion, which is for approval. Further discussion. Council members Joy and Neese.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think housing is very, very important. And the way that we are best able to address that is to keep solid and good partnerships across the board. I too think that 3D printing is a great idea. It's something that we can absolutely pursue. My concerns are about the deadlines and the way that HUD really evaluates whether or not we're moving forward with something that we've purchased and then essentially sitting on because it hasn't moved forward. And it's been a very long and difficult process. But I would always hope that we can maintain very good partnerships and that we look to each other for innovation. I absolutely love the ideas that Councilmember Owen has suggested. Absolutely. I think this is a wonderful discussion. I'm glad that we have discussions, but they always seem to come up at points where it's disjointed and it's all kind of ugly, I'm sorry, but a little bit ugly, instead of being a little bit more proactive and being out in front and saying, let's do it before we get to that point of decision. So I absolutely hope that all of the ideas move forward. It's a great idea, and I want the city of Billings to be a city that embraces innovation and embraces new ideas in terms of housing. So I really appreciate that. But I will support the motion on the basis of timing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Neese, and then we'll try to move to a vote.
Thank you, Mayor. Denise, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of good innovation here, but, and I think we've talked about it for a long time, and then now we have to come to a decision, and there's really no good options. And as much as we talk about it, and we want to see some different options come to us, they don't come to us. And so, Chris, I'm going to ask you, this is something that I'm concerned about, that I don't think we had good options here for the council to look at. And now we're at a deadline, and we got to use it or lose it. I don't agree with putting something and approving something that is just because we don't have any better options. I think we need to make sure that these type of things that we've talked about come to us in better options, well thought out beforehand, so that we can have those options to look at. And so I am not going to support the motion. I don't think the city should just spend the money to spend the money. I don't think we need to just do something. It may work well with a house on there, because it sounds to me like there'll be support to pass this, but I think that we need to make sure that in the future, when these things come up to us, we need to have a plan or a backup plan. Something in this program needs to make sure that these things are just not always up against a deadline. They missed the deadline last year because a project fell out. Well, where was the backup to those projects? And I think that we need to make sure these programs, if we've got things going on, that we have backups to those programs. So if we know there's deadlines, if we don't meet them, that we have someone we can fall back on. And so I'll look to you to see if that can be done in the future for things, but I won't support this motion at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor, we're ready to vote. Okay, well, the substitute motion is for approval. If it fails, then the underlying motion is for rejection. If in favor of the substitute motion, which is for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of approval, council members Shaw, Joy, Cole, Chiriki, Boyette, and Ripsis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Neese, Owen, Tidswell, and Parrington. And Councilmember Gulick recused himself. So motion passes 6-4. Next, separated item, Councilmember Parrington, professional service contract with Dowell, two-way street conversion, Montana Avenue road diet, and Montana Avenue street improvements. Or I'm sorry, other street improvements. Councilmember Parrington, did you want to start us off on that?
Yes, I will. And Debbie clarified quite a bit for me in an email that she sent. Whenever I read this, I didn't see it as just the contract for Dow. I saw it as part of the contract moving forward. But yet, another thing that you did say in your email to me was that the projected cost of this was going to be $7 million, which I thought there's so much more involvement in this project than just the two-way conversion on 29th and 30th, and I think that was getting close to 8, wasn't it? I think it was close, but it just doesn't seem like, and with our inflationary prices, that I don't know where we're going with this. So anyway, I still have a problem with it. I'm sure it'll pass, but I just have a problem with the two-way conversions at this point.
Okay, did you, all right, there's no motion.
No, there's no motion. No.
Okay. Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I move to approve item 1E.
Motion made, seconded, made by Councilmember Shaw, seconded by Councilmember Joy. Discussion now on the motion. I think after that, it would be good to get some comment from staff. Just to clarify, this is a contract for professional services for $600,000 at this stage, but it is a precursor to a much larger project. Councilmember Ripsis, you want to?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wondered if we had the same issue with this one where the contract wasn't attached to the memo. Do you have to?
No, no, you're right. You're right. We'll have to address that issue as well. And maybe Debbie can comment. So Debbie, if you can comment about where we are at for the contract, but also on sort of the substance of what the big picture looks like. This isn't just conversion of streets, it's chip seal and redoing of some streets, I believe. So can you talk to us, big picture?
Sure. So it is $600,000. This particular project includes a lot of public outreach. If we're going to do this in our community, it really needs to be an involved process. So there is a substantial amount of public outreach. Also, we're looking at Montana Avenue road diet. It won't be part of the construction, so the amount of the overall project doesn't include Montana Avenue. We just want to have it ready so when MDT does their overlay, we're right there with a striping plan that they can just use for their project. The rest of it, like the chip seal and everything, will be done, like I said last week, using street maintenance money. And then the remainder is TIF money. So we do anticipate right around $7.4 million. The project on 29th and 30th was $1.4 million, but it had a lot of signals on it. So there was a lot of signal work there that we don't anticipate seeing all over this project. So that's why the numbers maybe don't look exactly linear if you extrapolate them.
Okay, further questions for Debbie? Okay, don't see any. Thank you very much. Okay, further discussion on the motion, item 1E, which is for approval. Further discussion. Councilmember Neese.
Are we going to address the issue that the contract's not attached?
Oh,
I
sorry, I
see
should have
legal
grabbed
has reviewed this.
Yeah, Debbie, where are we on having a contract?
So big picture, I don't know that Chris wants me to go here, but we used to attach all of them, and then it got kind of to a point where we weren't having them attached to them because they were all the templates. So on this particular one, it's our professional services contract that we use. We fill in the blank on who it is and the amount, attach a scope of work. So the contract itself is the exact same template that we've used every time. So we kind of started not putting those on, I would say 6 months ago or so. But we can absolutely attach them. In this particular case, nothing changed on the professional services contract. It's the template exactly.
I guess what I would say is if you don't attach it, the staff report should be very explicit about where do you look for it if you want to see it. So, and say it's the standard one that's available on the city's website at this link. But beyond that, council can weigh in about whether they want to see an actual document. But one or another, we have to be able to access it, I would say. Councilmember Dees, that was your question, so.
Yeah, Mayor, I agree with you, and it would be helpful then to at least let us know that legal reviewed that if we're not going to see the contract, that it is the same contract, or at least, again, like you say, in the memo, so that we know it's the legal at least has reviewed that and approved that services contract.
Okay, further discussion on item 1E. Is there any further discussion on item 1E? Don't see any. The motion's for approval. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. I believe 10 in favor with Councilmember Purinton voting in opposition. Next separated item is item 1K, tax increment finance assistance and eBird. Councilmember Neese, was that your separation?
It was, Mayor.
You want to start us off?
I will. Mayor, I think that this is the same project that was emailed out to us a month or so ago, I think by the eBird. I believe it was, they were kind of discussing whether or not it could just be a email approval. And there was a lot of emails going back and forth and conversations. I understand what they're doing, and it appears to me that the eBird has a specific type of fence that they want, and I think that's a good idea. I mean, they want to be uniform. But like we did with the downtown TIFs, we have approved these projects where they're really going to go over and above the 5-to-1 ratio that we expect. And I made that suggestion. I don't like to see these projects come to us unless they're like on a pre-approved type program where the council is knowing that why we're doing a 60-40 advance on something like this. And so I mainly separated out to say that and ask the eBird to bring back to us a pre-approved program that if this fencing is that important for the eBird to get done down there, that's get a pre-approved program that they're going to spend X number of dollars per property or maybe a standard fencing, a chain link fencing, which they prohibit, is this fencing is, 40% more than chain link fencing, then that's what the standard program is approved up to a certain dollar amount. Just like we've done with the downtown TIF and some of the programs. So I'm not going to vote for this, and so I don't want to make a motion for it, but I don't think the project should be stopped.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I move we approve tax increment finance assistance from eBird to STIR LLC for redevelopment of 304 North 19th Street.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purinton. Second. The discussion now on the motion. I'll also just agree, it's far beyond the usual ratio. I can live with it because there's actually other money being put into the project. And it's a relatively low dollar amount, and it has a good look. But I hate to get in the habit of approving things that are far beyond the typical 5-to-1 ratio. Councilmember Purinton.
Yeah, Zach's here, and I know he's just dying to talk about this. But I also would like for you to address what Roy's talking about, having that program set up so that we don't have to go through the angst that you did at the eBird meeting, because I was there and everyone was going, what do we do? So.
Yep, Mayor and Council, thanks. Just clarification, I agree.
And Zach, for the public, can you just identify yourself?
You got Zach Tarakitis with the East Billings Urban Renewal District. Part of this came to us just quickly for the history of it. This came to us relatively quickly, and I guess we weren't looking for an email approval. That was the confusion probably on my part on the email, was just that it's identical to a project that came across percentage-wise for the exact same product. So I think one of our review committee members recognized that it was identical to the Bell Chemical project that was approved at the same amount for the same fencing. And it does come in, to answer one of Mayor Cole's questions, it's about a 200% increase on cost between chain link and the required materials for the eBird. So just to clarify a couple of those things, again, we were just trying to kind of be consistent with the projects. I think fencing is a good idea in our district because it's different than anywhere else in this city. But that was kind of just a few clarifying points on that it matched it exactly. So that's why we kind of scooted it along that way.
And I understand the rationale behind it, but if I understand Councilor Manish, you're talking about some sort of specific program.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. This matches exactly. And I think that tells me that there's probably other projects in the future like that. And so it is a small dollar amount. And if you brought a program to the council saying this is the kind of program that we want to see, you could have it pre-approved and you wouldn't have to go to the council to get approved. You could just get Chris to sign off on it and it's done.
Perfect. Great.
Councilor Tricky, and was this for Zach or?
I just want to say that the sign agreement we did with the downtown thing was like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. This is 4, 5, 6 times that amount. We're talking thousands versus tens of thousands, and I am not comfortable with pre-approving a set amount of money just for fencing.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are any other questions for Zach, any other discussion before we proceed to a vote? Don't see any, so we'll move to a vote. The motion is on item 1K. The motion is for approval. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If voting in opposition, please say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition were council members Neese and Tidswell. All other council members voted in favor, so the motion passes 9-2. Last item on the consent agenda, item number 1 is item 1M, resolution relating to South Tiff District bonds. Councilmember Neese, I believe that was also your separation.
Yes, Mayor, and I separated this so I could vote against this. Again, I did not agree with the extension of the South Tiff, so to be consistent, I'm going to vote against this. I understand this will likely pass, and it would be a problem if it did fail, but I'm just, again, going to vote no on this, so I'll let someone else make a motion to approve.
Okay. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve resolution relating to South Tiff District bonds.
Second, Councilmember Joy, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Shaw. Discussion. Is there any discussion before we proceed to a vote? Okay, the motion is for approval, item 1M. If voting in favor, please say aye. Aye. If voting in opposition, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition, council members Neese and Purington. Motion passes 9-2. Very good. That concludes item number 1. It's 7. Yeah. Item number 2. It's 7:20. Council is the kind of the, I call it the main item on the agenda this evening. For authorization of sale or RFP for these properties. I guess rather than getting into it, do you want to take an early break and come back? Okay, we'll take a slightly early break at 7:20. We'll be started before 7:30, so come back as soon as you can. Yes, absolutely. They lose their vote. It's not. Since I said 7:30, but it's just. There we go. Very good. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We left off at item number 2. So, Tony, would you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2, public hearing and resolutions authorizing the sale, disposal, or lease of city-owned properties. A, current city hall. B, Park 1 ground level retail space. C, south surface parking lot off North 27th Street between First Avenue North and 2nd Avenue North. And D, north surface parking lot at the same location.
Thank you very
Same
much.
address.
We'll turn it over to Kevin. And Kevin, I assume the intent here is to have a presentation on all of the sub-items 2A through 2D. We do need to have a public hearing, but I assume it'd be your recommendation that we wait and have a combined public hearing on all 4 of those items after your presentation.
Correct, Mayor. If we could do that, I'll go through the presentation on all the properties, and then, we can't have one public hearing, but then we'll need to have a separate vote on each property.
Okay, very good. Yeah, separate resolutions for each one. So with that, we'll turn it over to Kevin.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Thanks this evening. I'm going to go through just the process that we're currently under for selling, disposing, or leasing of city property to kind of give you an idea of where we're at. And there are 4 properties that we do want to start actively marketing and putting out there, which we'll go through each of those properties. It's a little bit delayed because I got it up on Zoom, so bear with me here. So the steps of the process are covered in Billings Municipal Code 22-900. And as I'm talking with Gina in legal department, it's not a great worded ordinance. So we do want to come back to you at some point, mainly probably at the point when Mr. Rups's property initiative comes forward and you ask us to look at the process for how do we, sell or dispose or, market those properties. So we'll come back to you with some better wording that we feel would be better for the ordinance. Right now, it's not very clear. It's kind of a chicken and the egg, which comes first, which doesn't, on how we do some things. And we'll go through some of that process. But basically tonight, what I'm asking you for is resolutions so that we can start putting these properties up for sale. So that's all it is. We have not done an RFP or anything for these properties. We have not advertised for competitive bids. But what we did do was put out legal advertisements on all these properties saying we're interested, potentially interested in selling these. Council's got to make that determination. And then we also did mail to the property owners within 300 feet of these properties saying, hey, potentially council could put these properties up for sale or disposal. So those steps have been done. So what we're at tonight is just the resolution stage, we have not put this out for competitive bid yet. The competitive bid process comes next, and on advice from legal counsel, what we'll do is we'll advertise again for that competitive bid process, and we'll more than likely do the same mailings to the 300-foot, to the property owners within 300 foot. With that, the city council, when we put out that competitive bid process, we'll bring that back to city council saying, here's what we received, here's staff recommendation, what do you want to do? And then the ordinance gives council some leeway. You don't have to pick the highest bidder. It can be what's in the best interest of the city is kind of the best way that I like to put it. Or you can reject all the bids flat out when we bring that back to you. And you may consider and impose deed restrictions at that point if you choose to do so with the properties. So the properties that I'm bringing to you tonight are Park One Retail. A couple things that I've noticed when we kind of went through this with legal descriptions. So the legal descriptions basically contain the whole property. So like Park One Retail, which I've got some pictures of it coming up here. It's one legal description. Currently, we've got, I believe, 5 units, and I use units loosely because they have not been condoed into individual, tax identified units. And then you've got the parking garage structure itself. So when I'm saying Park One Retail, the intent of this is just the retail units on the bottom level. The next property is City Hall, current City Hall that we're in tonight. The purpose of that is, we are looking at moving all operations over to the Stillwater building and talking with real estate broker and stuff. We're at a time that it might be advantageous to put it on the market, get that process started for current City Hall. And then there's 2 surface parking lots. If you think of the Burger Dive, and I'll have a picture for you coming up here. If you think of the Burger Dive, one lot to the south of the Burger Dive, one lot to the north of the Burger Dive, there's surface parking lots that the parking division owns, through the city and manages those for just ground level parking. With that, like I said, we've been in contact with a real estate broker, and Matt is here tonight. And what we want to do is, put out a request for proposals for those selected. We did put out a request for proposals for real estate brokers, and NAI was one of those that was selected to represent the city in real estate dealings and offerings. We've been working with those on these properties, getting the idea of what's the best way to market these, what's the market analysis look like, what's the best method of going about, either dividing these properties or potential for these properties. And what we're looking at is development opportunities, maximizing the value, and promoting city land use policies. And I think Councilmember Gulick had a question today on a couple of the surface lots. Definitely our intent, if we're looking in the downtown area, we want to disperse some economic development down there, when we're looking at selling, these properties, and that would be a main consideration when we go to the competitive bid process and bring that back to council. Okay, Park One Retail. As you can see, it's the Park One parking garage. Our intent right now is, we are not looking at selling that, but if there would be an offer or something that would include that, and it seemed advantageous to the city, maybe we would want to consider it. But this whole unit is one unit, one tax code at this point. In conversations with the real estate broker, NAI, at this point, a couple different things, and we can certainly, when we bring back, the competitive process of what that looks like, what we're looking at right now is the units there might be better off condoed, which means breaking them down legally into separate units and selling them off individually. That could be one method that we'd kind of want to go about it, but we'd want to keep some options open there. Or it could be that an investor would want to come in and do exactly that, buy the whole, ground level essentially of Park One parking garage, and then do the same thing or do something similar, maybe break it up into bigger units, smaller units, something of that nature. But right now, just on the very initial market analysis, that's kind of, what we see to be the most advantageous. We have been having a lot of inquiries from the Downtown Business Association, and Mehmet, talking with him of small businesses inquiring, about properties, and a lot of small businesses, there's not a lot for sale in the downtown area. There's stuff for lease, but there's not a lot for sale. So again, that's one area that we might want to explore with that location. And City Hall, I don't think I have to say too much about City Hall. A couple of the breakdowns, we've got an old part of City Hall, a new part of City Hall, and the parking structure itself. So, I'm looking at it kind of in 3 units, but again, it's one legal unit at this point. So depending on the development opportunities and stuff, we might have to break it down into different units or separate units as we move forward here. But again, we've got a real estate broker that's what they do for a living, that can guide us and help us in that direction. Okay, the surface lots. So as you can see here, Burger Dive's right in the center of that picture. It's a surface lot to the south, surface lot to the north, and this is actually broken up into 3 legal descriptions. What we'd anticipate is that north lot is broken up into 2 tax codes or legal descriptions. What we would anticipate is, more than likely, a developer's going to want to look at that as one type of unit, but just recognize that it is two separate legal descriptions for that one lot. One for it'd be the south side, right next to the Burger Dive, and the north side that's up against the other building. I can't remember what the name of that building is there. So with that being said, the resolution, this was the current language that I put in the resolutions, and then talking with the mayor earlier today, talking with legal, and again, there's kind of a circular, in the ordinance, there's kind of a circular idea of what comes first, whether, it's the resolution, where do the mailings come in, where do the legal description, where does the public hearing come in? It's not real clear. So with that, so that's a current language that you saw attached to the resolutions, and I sent out earlier today. Well, what we'd like to replace it with, if you approve them, and you'd have to do that in the motion to do that, is replace it with this language here. And what that does is just basically regurgitates the municipal code that it comes out of, so that we're very clear, on the process of what we're doing when we're moving forward to, sell these lots or put them out for a competitive bid. And it's our intent that if you pass these resolutions, that when we go to the competitive bid RFP process, we will do the legal notices again, and we'll do the mailings again out to the property owners within 300 feet to make sure that we're very, very transparent on what we want to do with these properties. With that, I am open for questions.
Questions for Kevin? Councilmember Purington.
I guess one of the first things that I would ask that you alluded to was the small businesses. Downtown, it's primarily small businesses are leasing. Is there really a market for small businesses to buy these individual units?
So, I can certainly ask Matt to come up here and comment a little bit more because he's the expert on it. But from a lot of the conversations I've had with the downtown business people down there, there is not a lot on the market for that. And, if you're a small business owner, a lot of times that's a way you can build some equity. You can invest back in your business and do that. So that certainly could be an option. But again, we want to look at all the options, what's going to maximize our potential down there. And that was one of the things that was talked about and potentially brought forward. But certainly Matt could answer that question better.
Thank you very much. We'll ask Matt to come up at some point here, but right now, questions for Kevin. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, when you first started, did you say you've already sent notices of interest to selling out to the public? Or did I miss? You did. So you have noticed the people that were going to sell it. Okay. And all of these properties here?
Yes. So what the ordinance requires is property owners within 300 feet of the property that we're selling have to get a notice in the mail. And so we did send out all those notices that were required.
Okay. So that
I have got a couple of responses.
Okay, so that was sent before we've approved that. If we denied it, then that was you just retract that?
Yeah, I mean, and the notice was that we were having this public hearing tonight for a resolution of intent to sell. So,
notice it was a public hearing.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Okay, other questions for Kevin? Do you got something else?
I do have some more questions regarding the retail space. If it was condoed, I guess it's good. Half a dozen, 1/6 of the other, whether you do it a whole condo lower unit or not. But my concern is then we're going to be part of that condo association. Is that correct? Because we're going to still have the parking above, and so there would be some kind of responsibility the city would have still with those other landowners as far as maintenance and damage or anything like that regarding the parking structure may damage their property or whatever. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. And condoing, it's not an easy process by any means, to do. But yes, that's the intent. And we've got something similar in place with the Empire Garage. City owns, the Empire Garage parking structure. We've got a bunch of retail units underneath. We have a Empire Garage Owners Association that we're part of, the city is part of, that we attend regular, the meetings and everything for that. So I would anticipate if that's the route we go, that it would be something similar to that arrangement that we have at the Empire.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Another question, follow up on that?
Sure.
So with the units that are currently there, when it comes time for us to take a look at whether selling or not, will we have a good idea of what those rents are coming in? Because that could help pay some of the costs at the new center, rather than selling it and losing that rental income. And so it'd be good to be able to compare that type of thing when it comes time to it, so.
Yeah, correct. We currently have 3 leases in place, Self-Help Law Center, Budget Instaprints, and Volunteers of America. And then we've got the Crime Prevention Center in there, but the intent was that the Crime Prevention Center is going to move out of there, move over to the Stillwater building. So we do have leases in place with all them. But what I can say is I know since I've taken this position in 2018, we are highly underutilizing and undervaluing some of that property there. So whatever the intent is of council, we need to look at that and look at some of, even look at those leases if that's the route we choose to go.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. That would help the budget a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Owen.
I just have 2 questions. The first is sort of simple. There are people who have parking permits in one of these parking lots, right? What happens to them?
So, I mean, if we sell those lots, and I'm assuming you're talking about the ones by the Burger Dive,
Yes.
around the Burger Dive. Yes, I mean, the parking, spots would go away. I think they're just on a month-to-month basis is my understanding, but I can certainly,
Those are not city staff?
no, they're
Oh,
not city
okay.
staff.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the next, there's this note here in the staff memo that says that there's going to be several options considered to maximize the potential for the listing and all that. When we look at disposing of these properties, at least from the way we bid or market them in the community, are we exclusively sort of maximizing the best dollar value? Have we looked, or are we doing outreach to see if there are policy things that can be combined with getting best value? I mean, are we only looking at best cost, or are we making sure that we aren't missing opportunities here?
Well, I think you hit it spot on, opportunities, anytime that we've had, some interest, some questions about that, we're talking with Downtown Business Association, what are their thoughts on, these properties, what do we need to see in some of these areas? So we've been in contact with them, and that's again, part of, maximizing value to the city. But what does that value look like? Does it mean just dollars, or does it mean other things? And it could be opportunities, for additional economic development that we need, in those certain areas.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else for Kevin before we call up Matt Robertson? I think we've heard from Councilmember Neese. We'll go to Councilmember Shaw first.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for you, but I was going to ask Your Honor, instead of going back through council, that we move ahead with hearing from Matt and going to public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. We will do that. Councilmember Neese, you had your hand up, though, for something quick?
Yeah, Mayor, on the, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. While we get Kevin.
So there was a comment made about, what we'd want to see built on some of these properties. So my concern is, maybe a nonprofit will go in there, we've already taken the Stillwater off the tax rolls. Really, what kind of conditions can we place? I mean, when someone buys a property, it's the property unless we, have some stiff conditions on that, I suppose, and that's going to make it unattractive for someone to buy. And then, right now we have 2 lots that are used as parking lots. I'm assuming they're zoned for parking lots. If someone buys that, I'm assuming why wouldn't they use that as a parking lot until they decide to develop? Maybe it would be 10 years from now before they develop that. Is that something that we can require to them to develop something and they just don't sit on it for 10 years?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer it, then I'm gonna look to legal to make sure that they're gonna back this up. So with that, city council can place deed restrictions on that. And I think time of development could be one of those deed restrictions that could be available. Certain types of development, I think you could place deed restrictions on that, but again, I'd defer to legal if that's a proper deed restriction or not, if we sold the properties.
Well, I think that the mayor may want to pipe in here, but clearly you're going to have to negotiate any of these sales. So somebody may not want to accept a deed restriction that council may want to place, but generally the kind of deed restrictions are to use it for a certain kind of purpose. And then it would revert back to the city if it was discontinued to be used for that purpose. But generally, yes, you can place deed restrictions on a piece of property if the buyer wants to agree to that.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Neese, if you wouldn't mind my comment, I guess I would just say, rather than think of it in terms of deed restrictions, which would suggest that you've transferred the property to somebody else, and then if they violate that, you'd have to get it back from them. It would make more sense just to make sure you knew what they were going to do up front, make that part of the contract, and you don't transfer the property until you're sure that they're ready to proceed with whatever the project might be.
Okay, thank you.
Why don't we ask, a question for Kevin before we bring up Matt? Okay, Councilmember Tricky.
Is the Downtown Billings Association looking at putting an RFP together for the surface parking lots?
Councilmember Shrecki, not to my knowledge. I have been approached by a developer that has some ideas that I'm not at liberty to discuss at this point. But no, Downtown Business Association has not approached about an RFP for those surface lots.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Maybe, could you tell us, the DBA has talked about the yesteryears building, so maybe a lot of city property on sale on a couple of different blocks. Have they talked about that? Are they going to put the yesteryears building up for sale? Thank you.
So Councilmember Joy, I have not been to a Downtown Business Partners meeting, and I don't know if Chris has attended one recently, might be able to answer that.
Yeah, Councilmember Joy, Mayor and Council. So regularly attending their meetings, that is certainly something that they would like to do. The purchase was never with the intent of holding the property long-term, but I think we will all experience, at least in my previous lives, this never goes as clean and simple as you think it is. It's really a challenge because we're not just interested in selling a piece of property to the highest bidder. We really are not interested in someone speculating with these parcels. We're looking for development and redevelopment opportunities in the downtown, and we want to be open to that creative process. So specific to your question, yes, the DBA regularly talks about how could they package that yesteryear's building to be put on the market, similar to this conversation. And this is a precursor to your initiative of dozens of various size parcels around the community that may be able to be put out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, don't go away. Let's ask Matt Robertson, the real estate agent you talked about, to comment generally, Matt, however you want. One issue did involve the possibility of condoing the first floor of Park 1. If you can comment on the market on that, I'll put in my own 2 cents on that as somebody who once looked for small office ownable condo space downtown of 1,000 to 5,000 square feet, as opposed to an entire building. They're scarcer than hen's teeth, because the only condoed office building I can think of downtown is where the patent law firm is above the Montana Power Building, right? Yeah. That's condoed. Okay, good. That's good to know. So anyway, there's not a lot, but if you can comment on that.
Yeah, exactly that. We've got a lot of larger buildings downtown, especially the retail spaces. The only retail condoed spaces are the ones that we sold off as part of the Empire Garage project. The frat building has some condoed spaces, so that's on the corner of 29th and 2nd. The Montana Power Building and the Stapleton Building are all condoed up. All of those, while the Stapleton Building is condoed, those are all owned by one family and leased out. So small retail spaces are in demand. You can't find a good example would be Aspinwall. Aspinwall is a small downtown specific retailer that would love to own their own building. But in order to do that, you have to find either a single level building like they're in, their ownership doesn't want to sell it as a multi-tenant building, or be able to invest in a large property. So by condoing it up, we can maximize our price per square foot, smaller spaces, sell typically for a little bit larger amount, and open for new opportunity for downtown. When we sold the Empire Garage condos, those were acquired very quickly. And they've been a great representation of retail in downtown. They've been full. We haven't had a lot of turnover in those spaces. The biggest thing for downtown street level retail is consistency and predictability. So when you have a lot of holes, that creates that blight. So we try to make that as cohesive as possible. So that's one of the reasons why we were looking at that. An investor could come in and do the same thing, make small spaces for tenants. But again, in driving the development of downtown, having more people with more skin in the game, I think makes more sense.
Okay, questions for Matt. Councilmember Nees, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor. So when you talk about condo, that's, could this building where the current city administration office is, would that, because it's parking above and then the first floor is really offices, so would that also be something that we would look at condoing out?
Certainly could be, and I think that's been part of the conversation as well.
Okay.
This is a much different animal than Park 3. Park 3 is very compartmentalized. You've got one side on one side of the garage and one on the other side, so it sets up for that. It already has multiple entrances. This, through the years, has ebbed and flowed. We have multiple levels. We have retail, street level retail / office. We've got a parking garage. This one is a unique one. But
Yeah, and I was just talking mainly what's underneath the parking garage. This side, I think, should just go as a whole project, but yeah, I think the underneath would probably be condoed out. Because we would retain the parking on that. Do I understand that correctly?
Not necessarily.
I hear him shaking yes, okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did, as part of our negotiations and our exploration of finding a new city hall, we did talk about this building. And I was just, what possibilities do you see for it? Because at the time, we were looking at a very no budget and trying to explore a lot of possibilities. But what are some of the possibilities for this building? Thank you.
One of the things we do in any disposition type situation is we always look at the highest and best use of that property. And I think that's what you're asking, is what is the highest and best use of a building that was built turn of the century and added on to later with a new garage and new retail. I think it could be a mixed-use component. I think the old City Hall side of things, through a lot of renovation, could set up very well for multifamily with a street-level retail component. The parking garage plays to that. All of those things can be negotiated with a developer as to how we want to utilize this, what that looks like with the partnership, if the parking was retained. All of those things can be talked through at that point. But I think high level, you're probably going to look at some sort of developer doing a fairly sizable project here in this building. The parking garage and the retail is a little bit more cut and dry, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Matt before we go to a public hearing? Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
Let's open this up then for public hearing. If anybody would like to comment on items 2A, 2B, 2C, or 2D, those are the 4 properties that we've been discussing here, City Hall, Park 1, and then the 2 surface lots. Please come forward. Ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address.
My name is Mike Matthew. I live at 115 North Broadway, which is just a block away. And it could save you some money because you sent me 22 notices because I do have a condoed building. And I have, for 22 years, been leasing 12 spots in the north parking lot. The building owner that had it before I did also leased those same 12 spots. So they've been tied to our building for a long time in relationship to tenant use out of our building. Personally, we use 2 of those spots for our residential parking. People say, where do you park? I say, I park in a bar parking lot, because if you go there after 4 o'clock, you're not going to find a space because it's filled up. And it stays that way all the time. But I'm feeling that once City Hall moves, the parking people from Stillwater are going to go over to the Stillwater parking garage, and I'm going to get a space in this one finally, because I've been on a waiting list forever and can't get in. So I'm not so concerned about my personal parking, but I am concerned about the fact that there are small parcels, one's 75 feet wide, one's 50 feet wide, and then the 2 other owners in that same area have buildings that they quite honestly know are going to be torn down. They're buildings that are of no consequence. And those properties are already owned by people that I think you could call developers. So if we bring into the mix other ownership, we're actually slowing down the potential of that property being developed, because nobody wants really to develop a 50-foot lot. Nobody wants to develop probably even a 75-foot lot. That's not big enough. So I think we have to be very cautious about the fact that if we create a situation where we maybe end up with 4 owners instead of 2 owners in the city, we've actually slowed the potential of development down and not increased the potential. Yeah, so you have an RFP to write, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't try and do something. I just think that you have to move forward very cautiously so that you don't lock that property up where you have 4 different owners and you're never going to get anything done.
Thank you very much. Further public comment on items 2A through 2D. Is there any other public comment on item 2? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period. Back to council. Councilor Tricky, you had your hand up, and Councilor Boyette and Shaw and Gulick.
Yeah, so Kevin, are we considering doing an RFP in the process of trying to sell this stuff? Any of these?
So if council approves the resolutions tonight, yes, the intent is then that we would put together RFPs for these properties and then go to the competitive bid process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Boyette and Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution for the sale, disposal, or lease of the current city hall as recommended by staff.
Okay, that's item 2A, second by Councilmember Shaw. We'll proceed then on the motion. Discussion on the motion, Councilmember Boyette, and then Councilmember Shaw.
Right. I mean, we need to get this process started, and that's all this is. We haven't sold anything, we haven't bought anything, we haven't done anything. We just need to start the process. This is all this is. To me, it's a no-brainer. Let's get moving and move on with it.
Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, was that the right language? Or did we need to, I know you had some different language to use.
Councilmember Shaw, yeah, if the council wants to go that route, yeah, with the amended language, and I can put it back up on the screen for you.
And again, the motion was to approve a resolution as recommended by staff. And the recommendation of staff is what you saw earlier. So it would include the new language in the proposed resolution. Okay.
Gina's nodding, so we're all covered. Okay.
And yeah, Gina's giving the thumbs up on that. So while we looked like that, or for that, Councilmember Shaw, did you have other further
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say to staff, thank you. I mean, this is a lot of work even to get it to this point. I'm excited to see what comes of this and what comes back to us. I hope it's something creative and really cool that will spur economic development. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the responses that we get, and I hope the development community is listening and will actually turn in proposals.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Shaw, I'd recognize Councilmember Gulick and then Councilmember Neese.
I think actually I will speak to the 2B. So I guess at this point with the motion, I probably should just speak on 2A. So I will cede the time.
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I think this is something that we do need to move forward on. I have no trouble with putting out something. My concern is, because I've heard a lot tonight about, highest and best use. And you know me, I want to see the highest and best dollars to pay for the city hall. Okay. But I've also heard we want to put it out RFPs for redevelopment. Well, redevelopment may or may not be the highest best dollars because we need to make to fund the city hall. So I'm concerned about what the RFP is going to look like. We're approving to put an RFP out, but we're not approving to see that RFP to see what the city is going to advertise this property for. And so I mean, I'll support the motion, but I would like to see us be more understanding of what that RFP is going to be for, and not just just sell it because we want to. And there's some good points about, if you do want redevelopment, you're probably going to require them to buy all those lots. And that's going to be, I know I went through some property like that, and it's difficult to find buyers for buying 2 lots. They'll buy 1 lot, but sometimes they're not going to buy 2, so that means if you're going to require them to buy 2, you're going to have to lower your price. And so that's something I'm concerned about.
So if I can ask Kevin and/or Chris to comment on the possibility of providing a draft to the council for input on the RFP or engage in the process. My understanding of the motion does not require staff approval of the language of the RFP, but I do think it'd be a good idea to at least keep the council informed of the process. You want to comment, either of you?
Mayor and council, certainly happy to keep you abreast of it. I think the more steps we want to add into the process, the more complicated we make it. I think it would, if there's the kind of policy clarity from the 11 of you that says, I want the highest dollar, period. That would be important to know. Because I think, though, the redevelopment, the taxable value, part of this is getting this land back on the tax roll. And so, sure, I'd love to see a clean deal, set of clean deals that offer appraised value for land, and I'm building a 19-story building on this parcel, but you're not going to see what you get until you put it out there in the market. However much you want to be deeply involved in it, you can. It just slows us down as to what you're expecting. Or do you want the RFP to come back on the consent agenda for your review before it goes out to the market? Do you want to give us some parameters tonight? We can go either way.
Okay. I was not hearing any request for approval, but information or involvement, I guess. Councilmember Trickey?
My suggestion would be that we have a work session on it. And just kind of kick the ideas around and whatnot. And that way we can direct you to do whatever we feel like we want to do with it.
Okay. My only suggestion on that is if you can have a draft to actually respond to, it might be more productive than, talking abstractly. But
great idea.
So we do have a motion. Again, the motion is for approval. Further discussion on the motion. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. Motion is for approval. Item 2A. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Brings us to item 2B, Park 1 ground level retail space. Councilmember Gulick.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I do like the idea of having this be condo to have small commercial spaces. It does seem like it sounds like it's a need. So I support that. I'm not too concerned about this, but I just want to make a point from a design perspective. I'd not want to see us put any sort of deed restrictions on facade improvements. Right now, the facade is all kind of continuous, all the same, and it just has not, and that there's a green awning throughout the whole thing and this kind of smoky glass. And it's not resulted in the kind of differentiation between businesses that has been very successful. I think it's quite a different, it's different location too, but quite different in terms of how it's performed compared to the Empire Garage. So I'd want to make sure that we did everything we could to set it up for success for those kind of spaces. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Joy. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution for the sale, disposal, or lease of Park 1 ground level retail space as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Discussion now on the motion. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we just don't know what we're going to get until we do send it out. So to me, again, this is just, let's see what happens. We can always turn it down. We can change it later, but we need to see what the public, what the business wants. Maybe we won't get any bids. Maybe we'll get 50, but we don't know until we got to get it out.
Thank you, Councilmember Rowan.
I completely agree with Councilmember Boyette, and I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding the conversation, but I would hope that there'd be some consideration of just a blanket RFP. Here are the properties, bid on one, bid on them all. We could condo it, we could not condo it. I mean, let's open up the chance for people to think creatively. So I don't know if we have some sort of requirement where each of these have to be bid individually, but I would sure hope we'd cast a wide net and see what we get.
The comment I'll make on this one is, I think I've probably talked to some council members about this. My pet project goal, whatever, is to see a urban dog park using canine turf in the alley immediately on the north side, or I'm sorry, the south side of the Park 1 property. And I don't think this interferes with that, but I just want to make a mention of that in the sale of it, if there was anything about that property, that unit farthest to the south that was inconsistent with that, I would be concerned. So, because that's the key to getting people living downtown, is getting their dogs living downtown. People follow their dogs, and they won't go someplace if they don't have a place for their dog. And we want people to live downtown. Further comment on the motion, item 2B. Any further discussion on the motion for 2B? If not, we'll proceed with a vote. If in favor of the motion, which is for approval, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 2C, the southernmost of the two surface lots on the south side of the Burger Dive. Is there Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution for the sale, disposal, or lease of the south surface parking lot off North 27th Street between 1st Avenue North and 2nd Avenue North as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Discussion on that one. Councilmember Boyette and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. What I would hope, if I was a developer, I'd like to buy both of these. I'd like to buy the hamburger place in any of those buildings. This would be a perfect place to clean that up and to put in a high-rise apartment building, which would be taxable. I mean, I personally don't see somebody buying one and not buying the other. Why would you even want to do that? You're not going to make any money renting parking places. I mean, I think this is a perfect deal where we, the city, can direct this through the RFP for a developer to buy both of them and build something beautiful for the city.
Councilmember Neese.
I agree with Mike saying, as I understand, parking is a premium downtown, and even though we're moving to the Stillwater building, our parking is not. Our parking is going to stay in this structure, could be for years to come, because we're not going to be, as I understand, we won't be using the garage over there. Visitors may, but the city won't. So we'll have, our parking garage here will still probably be full. So one of the things that this is going to do is remove a lot of parking from the city, as far as what people can park at, that whole area, if this gets developed and we're still at the Stillwater building, or still using our own parking. So there's a concern this could be used for parking for a long time to come, even if it is sold to one investor. But I just want people to be aware that doesn't mean the parking's going to go away. It may stay there for a long time, or if it does go away, if someone does build there, we'll be short more parking downtown. But I'll support this. I think we do need to move forward this to get going.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item 2C? Councilmember Shaw.
I'll just make a comment to that, which is that we have kind of a glut of parking downtown with the parking garages, so I actually would hope that the city would sell off basically all of the surface level parking garages. It is not the highest and best use of the land by any stretch of the imagination. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tricky.
I got a spot at Rock 31, so for the last 6 weeks or so, I've been parking downtown almost every day, and I've never had to park further than a block away from 2nd and Broadway when I'm going there. So I do not see a parking problem at all downtown. If we put 20-story residential building there, that's going to change, but...
Thank you. Further comments on item 2C? Before we proceed to a vote. Orsini, so we will move to a vote. The motion is for approval, item 2C. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Final item on number 2 is 2D, the north lot, north surface lot. Motion, Councilmember Gulick.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution for the sale, disposal, or lease of north surface parking lot off North 27th Street between First Avenue North and 2nd Avenue North, as recommended by staff.
I'll second that with you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Tiswell.
You bet.
Discussion on item 2D. Okay, if in favor of the motion for approval, item 2D, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Go forth and develop. Somebody. Councilmember Tricky?
Before we leave that topic, can we get an update on when we're going to get an update on the list of available land that the city has could be made available for development?
So Councilmember Tricky, Mayor and Council, so we pulled it off the agenda the last work session a week ago just because we had a funny feeling we were already going to be until 10 or 11 o'clock. I think what I should do is stick it in the weekly this week, frankly, because it is the GIS map is all set up and you can go around in there and touch the properties and learn about the properties. So I think that's the first step. It's just waiting. We'll give you that link this week and then look at a work session to have a broader dialogue about it, especially after you have a few weeks to look around in there. But the staff has provided background relative to, yes, these are the parcels we think there's not a lift station waiting to go on that site or some critical piece of infrastructure. They're available parcels for redevelopment. Just don't want to set the stage and manage expectations. There's not a lot of, 2 acres rectangle parcels in the middle of neighborhoods to build housing on, but we're going to get creative and we're going to put it out there, offer creativity in our community. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And since we are on this item, I guess still, I guess it was 2 weeks ago that we approved a contract under $100,000 for an audit of the parking garage structures. City Administrator, Assistant City Administrator Iflin would remember the details of that. But it does seem that that would be a prime place to at least have somebody take a look at the issue raised by Councilmember Tricky before, which is, would either of these buildings that involve the 2 parking garages be candidates for going up? There wouldn't be enough money to do a full engineering analysis of that, but if somebody could at least determine whether it might be worth taking a further step in that direction, this would be an appropriate time since both these properties would be involved in that process. So I just throw that out to staff since we'll be working on that parking lot audit contract. So for what it's worth. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 3. Tony, would you read item number 3?
Item number 3, City Administrator's Annual Performance Evaluation and Approval of Employment Contract.
Thank you very much. I'll start this, and then I'll turn it to City Minister Kukulski and also to the other two members of the Council Operations Committee, Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Boyette, since they were involved in this review process. So as Council will remember, several weeks ago, we met in executive session to go over Chris's evaluation that included individual evaluations from individual council members and also 360 evaluation done by some of the department heads. That was a very useful process, very, I thought, productive process, relatively smooth process. The bottom line for members of the public was that we liked what Chris was doing. The approvals were good, and we hope he continues with us. That's not to say that we didn't find areas of improvement, things that we thought there should be some further discussion about, and we had that discussion as well. So we agreed that we didn't have time to go through changes to the employment agreement, which is now 3 years old. Some of the language in there is simply out of date about making allocations for moving and things like that. And so the contract that you saw in your packet deleted that, changed some of that, but also had some more substantive proposals in it. And I'll give, again, Chris opportunity to comment on these things, as well as Council Members Neese and Boyette. But the term of the agreement was a 2-year period that we thought it made sense to move that back a year to 3 years, which would expire then in 2025. However, consistent with our charter, the contract can be terminated by the council at any time. That doesn't mean it can be terminated without cost. However, as you'd expect, there is the severance provision in there, and the severance agreement allows for a month for each year of service, which is now a minimum of 6 months. So now we're at 10 months. It caps out at 12 months, however. So in 2 years, that will be the maximum severance. We talked about compensation as a council. We agreed that Chris should be included with a pay increase of 3%, which is consistent with what other city employees are getting. That would make him the second best paid city administrator in Montana. Bozeman is kind of an outlier, even though it's half the size of our community. Their total compensation now, by my calculation, is about $275,000 when you take into account their housing and a very generous deferred compensation and a higher base salary. We simplified or suggest that the language about evaluation be simplified to just say that there'll be an evaluation during November or no later than the end of November. There was some really confusing language that we weren't really following in there before. And then lastly, and this is something I think we should discuss further, it allows the city administrator to convert what he would be getting for deferred compensation, which is now 12% of base salary, to be just added to his base salary instead of getting that in deferred compensation. And the thinking of that, and Chris can address this more clearly, is quite honestly, under the PERS program that Chris has been paying into, and we and other employers have been paying into, that final, your pension is based on the last 3 years of compensation. And so he might want to increase that. It's not based on deferred compensation, but apparently on the base salary. So that's my quick summary of what you have before us. What we're being asked to do is approve these contract changes that you have in your packet. Chris, why don't you comment as you want, and then we'll look to council members Boyette and Neese in case they wanted to add.
Mayor and council, I'll keep my comments brief, but it's a thank you for taking the time to go through the evaluation process, and particularly this year was the first year that you took the time to reach out to all those who directly report either to Kevin or I, which kind of leadership of the organization, and I think that's healthy. I think it was healthy that you got that feedback. Of course, I did not see that feedback, and that was fine, but you saw that feedback, so it could help you gauge my performance. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do that, and I think as the organization and as you take that seriously, when you do that, you're going to find continued higher level of comfort in people sharing, honestly, information, and I hope that's what you saw. So thank you for that. Several of you took the time to meet with me one-on-one and talk specifically about, strengths and weaknesses and things that we can do. I appreciate that. That dialogue, frankly, is way more important than a score per se on a particular item. And yet collectively, for me and for my family, yes, we try to minimize the risk that you wake up one day and you find out that, a majority of council wants you to move on. As quite deliberately not unique to this contract. It's a part of this profession. It's a necessity as an appointed executive that you have the complete and total authority to end this contract anytime you want. Yes, there's a severance component to it, but that is critical, that accountability be there. So I won't repeat. The mayor went through, I think it was hopefully the red line strikeout version made it crystal clear what was being adjusted. I think the thing that may be confusing to some would be Section 7, that's the retirement. The intent there is consistent with what the mayor talked about. It actually was fortunate enough to be old enough now to be in the system when you still could have a defined benefit. And I am in that defined benefit system with Montana Public Employee Retirement System, and your retirement is based on your highest paid 3 years. We both pay extra. If I, at some point, roll that into my base pay, it causes me to pay more into the retirement system and you to pay more into the retirement system. And so in a perfect world, you'd gauge that about 3 years before actual retirement. But that's why frankly, it says at the employee's discretion, all or part of this benefit may be added. Because it's not an automatic, frankly, from a financial standpoint, that it all should be or all shouldn't be. But as I said in the memo, tried to be clear, there was a little bit of debate with finance staff today if it was $2,705 or $2,400 and change, but let's just call it's a little under $3,000 if I were to choose to put all 12% into base pay. And then I also have to pay a few thousand extra as well because we're both paying in about 8% a year into the public employee retirement system. So that I think is the only thing that maybe isn't crystal clear to people. Why would that be there? How does that work? The intention is not to gain an additional 12. It already provides me with 12 of whatever my base pay is. Just a matter of if it's going to be directly into 401s, 457s, and health savings account, or indirectly me putting it there through base pay. So be glad to answer any questions. Back to the most important component, thank you for the evaluation, the feedback, and the opportunity to serve here the past 4 years, and hopefully with this, at least 3 more.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Councilmembers Boyette and then Neese, but also just raise a question that came up, that Councilmember Rupsis raised in a conversation this afternoon. Although this is being proposed by the Council Operations Committee, we didn't discuss one issue, which is if Chris exercises his proposed authority to change or put the deferred compensation into not deferred compensation, whether that will have the appearance of inflating the base salary if it happened in multiple years, in a way that would make us beyond the market of other similarly sized cities. And we had a quick conversation before this about whether that'd be the case or not, but I don't think that issue has been resolved. But I just want to make sure we put that on the table, and we'll have to come back to that. But Councilmember Boyette and Neese, did you want to comment further?
It was a fun discussion. The only issue that I think we ended up talking about the most was this deferred compensation of 12%. That was the main issue. And you know, I guess I'm wondering if there's a way that we could not include that when we're going. The trouble is, every year we would be paying 3% on a higher figure, unless we don't use that as in part of the salary for wage discussions.
But you are doing that today. So the current contract, let's be clear, there's already 12%, whatever base pay is, 12% added to it for under definition of paragraph 7. So when I started here, I think it was right around 185. I was getting 12% of 185. Today it's 12% of 206. Next year, Lord willing, it'll be 12% of 3% higher than where we are. The increase is that 2,700 on both of ours. Let's just round it. We're each going to pay about 3,000 more each year if it's decided to be rolled into base for purposes of the defined benefit. It doesn't, that's the increase to the cost to you. The 12% has already been in the contract. It'll continue to be in the contract, and it's deliberately under that section of Section 7, Retirement and Health Savings Account, to be clear that that's what it's for. So when you do look out, I mean, I can't say all are the same, although you could look at the 4 other, bigger cities in Montana, and you'll see a pretty similar base pay number, a compensation for deferred comp, and these percentages and numbers are all kind of in that marketplace.
Okay, and we'll get to other council members, but Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think as what the mayor said, I agree with what we talked about, as well as just making sure that the contract term was fit in line with our reviews. So when we did the reviews, the contract term would end it, and if, in case the council wanted to take any action after the review. The deferred comp thing was always anticipated. This was an election, as I understood, to be an election by the city administrator. It's not added to base salary. It's basically, it says here, added to base pay, which is basically his cash out. And again, I don't know the PERS system exactly what they measure it on. I don't think it has to be labeled as base salary on the pay, but I'm assuming, and we can check with this, they're talking about the compensation, the cash compensation in wages. So whatever his wages are for those last 3 years. And if he chose those last 3 years to take the full 12% into his base pay, or we want to change it to cash compensation, it's going to be included with his wages. So I don't see an issue with this as far as, unless we need to make something clarifying, saying this is an annual election that he makes by November of every year or something like that, whatever it is, whatever payroll needs to know. So that's the only thing I see on this. The one thing on the cost is, it does cost the city more. If he chooses to put all 20% in, it will cost the city, like you said, $2,700. That's about 1.1%. So in a sense, he kind of chooses his, if he wants to make a little bit more, he puts the entire 20,000 in instead of 3%. It's 4.17%. It is something that that in my opinion, I don't think it's something that we need to adjust for. If other council members want to say, well, if he does choose to put in X number of dollars. It's got to be his base salary has to be reduced by some. That's too complicated. I think for the amount that we're talking about, I would leave it as is and just say annually he chooses. It's not part of base. It's not part of the contract base salary, if that helps anyone. Or did I confuse people more?
It is confusing, and frankly, it makes me a little nervous to approve anything that's confusing, because right now it says be added to the base pay, and that's what it says. Councilmember Rupes, before we kick it to the rest of the council, and again, we don't have a motion on the table here, but would you just like to, since you raised this, I think, interesting question, address your interesting question? And then Councilmember Tricky.
I don't know that I can make it any, less complex, less confusing than it was. I think my concern was just that if Chris chose to do this 3 years in a row, say deferring or taking 10% as base pay instead of deferred compensation, does his salary then effectively become to 20 to 40 to 60 after 3 years, in which case we might be out of line with the market. And if he chooses to retire early at 55, then suddenly we're out there looking for somebody else and say, hey, I want the same deal he got, but I want my deferred payment too, deferred compensation too. So I want to make sure we're not getting out of sync while respecting, his needs to look after his family and the great service that he does provide us. So that's
Okay. I think we need a motion, and I'll just say, and Chris, you can comment, but I am concerned about the proposed change in item 7B, and I'm inclined to support a motion that would approve all these changes with the exception of that, but with the expectation that we could then involve Carla, we could involve Chris, we could involve looking at the details and coming back or not coming back once we'd had a chance to wrestle with that very narrow issue. Chris, if that was the result, what would you say?
Well, obviously, it's not the place to negotiate, right? I'm grateful for this opportunity. I would tell you, if at the end of the day, I'd like to keep it as simple as possible for payroll, although there is some complexity here for sure. If you want, I'd rather come back at the next regular meeting and approve it with the same effective date than do something tonight and then maybe there's going to be a change to it between now and the next meeting. Frankly, if you want more time, my intent in no way, shape, or form is to have someone thinking this is costing, today, these two benefits, base pay and this 12%, cost $224,472.75. And the intent here is that it's going to adjust by 3%. And the intent going forward is it's going to adjust by whatever percentage you give me as for my performance. Not that something sneakily kind of stacked in a way that made that different than that.
Mayor?
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
I'll make a motion to bring this back to the next business session. That way it'll give us time to iron this out. I agree with Chris. I'm sorry, I'll wait till the motion is second before I speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion? Councilmember Purington. Okay, go ahead,
I agree with Chris. This was brought up, and I think it probably just needs to be clarified, as you said. I think we'll have time. When's the next business session? It's still 20th. So it's still before the contract term. So I don't see any reason why this can't be ironed out easily before the next session. And it'll be a lot faster approval. We've already had the discussion about everything. We can just run this through and also send out a copy to all the council members to see if there's any other additional things that we see on it. So that would be my recommendation to move forward on this.
Okay, that is a motion. It's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion on that? Councilmember Tricky.
I guess I'm not reading it the same way as everyone else is. Base pay is defined as X, deferred pay is defined as Y, and if you choose to take some of your deferred pay this year, then you're taking some of your deferred pay this year, but that's not changing your base salary. That is just changing the amount of cash you get in that given year. That's the way I read it.
And perhaps that's a possible result. I don't read it that way because it says it may be added to the employee's base pay as defined in Section 3. So it's not a third category, it is base pay, as currently drafted by my reading, so.
Mayor, I agree with Danny. That's the way I read it. But I also see how Tom is seeing it and how you're seeing it. I think it's not clear, and I think we could take just a few moments and bring it back the next time and have it clarified.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ripps.
And I certainly didn't think there was any ill intent or anything like that. I just wanted to make sure the language was clear with what you were trying to accomplish.
Very good. And the other thing I would ask is, while we're all here, is there anything else while we're at it that was of concern that deserved further discussion before we proceed to a vote on the motion to delay it? Okay. So we'll vote. The motion again is just to delay this to the next business meeting. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. That concludes item number 3. And those are all of our regular items. So we're on to public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's somebody here who'd like to comment on anything that wasn't on our agenda, please come forward. Thank you for your patience to the Duns, who were probably hoping we would have been here a little bit quicker, but.
Thank you, Council. Mayor Wesley Dunn, Dorothy Lane, OP Clearinghouse, Heights, Montana. I'm going to spin the wheel here. I got a couple things I want to talk about, but I'm not going to have enough time. But one thing I do want to say, and I want everybody to hear this, Yellowstone County Police and Fire. We'll discuss it later.
Combined for the whole county.
We'll discuss it later. I just want to throw that out there. I got a little short story. So talking about the Heights and Heights, Montana. So I'm from an unincorporated town called Mableton, Georgia. Lived there for 27 years of my life. It has always been unincorporated, but they've always said if they made Mableton, Georgia a city, it would be the biggest city in Cobb County, Georgia. And they just did it this last vote. They just made Mableton, Georgia a city. They did it in 4 years. They started discussing it, started talking about it, started putting the plans together. They did it in 4 years. I know it's been discussed within the council and city, but I think come January 1, it'll be 2 years that cannabis has been legal in the state of Montana. And I'm just going to reach out and just say this. It's time we take that off our drug policy within the city of Billings. I know we've talked about it. I know there's word, but the boys in blue and red and the public works, everybody with the city needs to be able to reap the benefits of a legal substance. They can drink a beer and not have to worry about it the night before, but then, they can't smoke a legal substance or consume a legal substance. That's one thing we need to get started. I mean, y'all might not agree with cannabis. I don't care if you do or not. Like I said, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to speak for the people. It's time we move on. I mean, businesses can do what they want to do. They can say, nope, if you smoke cigarettes, we're not going to hire you. But this is a government. This is a city government. Marijuana is legal, just like alcohol is. It's time we take that off the books. Until the federal government legalizes it or decriminalizes it, CDL drivers, I'm sorry, boys, Public Works, you're just gonna have to deal with it. But other than that, there's no reason why they need to be tested for marijuana anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm cold. Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. We're both from Mableton. It's pretty big for us. Sorry. Okay. Judges can hold people accountable by a higher bond. I firmly believe this, and after speaking to a bunch of people in the city, they also believe the same. One of the issues in the city when it comes to holding criminals accountable is the judges. Why is it that they can lower bonds so low that repeat offenders get out so easy? I spoke to a probation officer recently, and she informed me that if judges and prosecutors would hold them at higher bonds, they would be less likely to reoffend. When you have offended 4 times in a 3-month period, why are you let out on $1,500 or $15,000 bond, which is $1,500 out of your pocket? That to me is just not acceptable. We were also told that when you hear of an offender being charged again, try and contact the prosecutor and ask them how to get a higher bond. Why? Why should the public have to reach out to people to ask them for higher bonds? Why can't the judges see repeating factors on their own? It's honestly scary to see how messed up and broken the whole system is. Why does it take so many people to be allowed for things start to happen? We appreciate all everyone is doing to help, but at the same time, I ask you to start being proactive instead of reactive. We all know that this would be a good thing to be proactive in this situation. So let's use the relationships that we all have, which I know we all have some, and make calls and start asking for changes in our broken system. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn, can I, a question for you.
Sure thing.
At one point, your neighbor that we've had plenty of problems with, Robert Morris, had a trial date, I think, for the 19th of this month. Was that put off, or can you?
I have no idea. The last we heard was what your email chain showed. We've never heard another word since then. We do know that he gets off probation November 17th.
Okay.
17th?
Okay, we'll try to find out.
We don't know, but 2 days later, yes, there's supposed to be a trial date for one of the charges.
Okay, thank you.
Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. I wasn't going to talk tonight, but something's really been on my mind. And it was when you asked Chief St. John, why don't we take everyone to the jail, even if the jail won't take them in? That was you, right, Mr.? Okay. Why don't we? Why can't that be a policy? You have to find your own ride home, buddy, if they can't take you. They've done the crimes. I understand he said more paperwork, but at what point? I keep saying we got to change something. The system is broken. Can it become a policy that they have to take them to the jail? The jail then refuses them. That has the paperwork for the commissioner's office to see, hey, the sheriff to see, hey, we're not keeping them. We're throwing them out. They get to find their own ride home. They have to figure it out. But maybe it'll stop something. Maybe it'll stop that one person from going and trying to break out someone's window. Goodness, in the Heights, how many windows were broken last night? Luckily, I don't live on a busy street, so I don't have to worry about it as much. But if we could just take them in and just drop them off. You can't keep them? Okay. But then there's also that paper trail. Hey, we couldn't keep the so-and-so. Why couldn't you keep the guy who just beat his wife? Why couldn't you keep the guy who just got in a fight and pulled a knife out and stabbed someone? Why can't you keep him? It'll give more checks and balances. That's all.
Thank you very much. Don't see any others, so we'll close the public comment on non-agenda items. Any council initiatives? Excuse me? Yeah, no, we're sympathetic, yeah, and we're trying to move in that direction. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.